The pavement glistened under the cold October drizzle, a slick mirror reflecting the vibrant hues of the Midwest night. He was sprawled on the ground, crawling on his hands and knees at my feet, blood pooling and splashing as he moved. I thought I could hear him sobbing, though my focus started elsewhere. I scanned the surroundings, desperate to see if anyone had witnessed what I'd done. The street was empty. I bolted to my car and sped off, trailing a few minutes behind my wife. How could she think she could come home 3.5 hours late from work without so much as a phone call and expect me not to come looking for her? My thoughts churned during the short 10-minute drive home. 11 years of marriage, ending like this? Damn. When I walked into the house, Lisa and Linda were seated at the kitchen table, happily cutting out paper dolls. My next-door neighbor, who'd been babysitting for the past 2 hours so I could search for my wayward spouse, had already left. She probably didn't want to stick around for the inevitable fireworks once my wife walked through the door. Lisa, nearly 10 years old, turned her gaze toward me, her expression instantly shifting to one of shock. "Daddy," she said, her voice small and concerned. "What happened? Are you okay?" I saw the same fearful look in Linda's eyes as they both looked at my shirt. I lowered my head to see I had his red blood all over the front of my white shirt. I hate lying to my kids, but I couldn't very well tell them the truth, so I had to think of something fast. "I'm okay, honey," I said. "Daddy just got a nosebleed in the car, that's all. I'm okay." My explanation didn't seem to relieve their anxiety even a little bit. "Where's Mom?" I asked. She came in and just ran upstairs. "What's going on, Daddy?" I think she was crying. "Are you and Mommy fighting?" Linda, our 7-year-old, looked even more scared than her older sister. "No, honey, please don't worry. Everything is just fine," I said, trying to comfort both my daughters and lying to them for the second time in less than a minute. Everything was not fine. I had just caught my wife, their mother, with another man, and I was sure the police would be at my front door shortly to arrest me. I got to the top of the second-floor landing and could hear crying coming from our bedroom. As I walked in, Joanne, my wife, was sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked up through her teary eyes when she heard me walk in. The terrified look on her face mirrored the anger in mine. "Oh, God, look at you. You're all full of blood. What did you do?" she asked in between sobs. "Did you hurt him?" "Well, let's just say the next time you kiss that frog prince's front teeth won't be in the way of your tongue," I said, sounding as nasty and sarcastic as possible. Things were just starting to register now. I was so tense I was literally shaking all over. I could hardly breathe. My stomach was doing flip-flops and every nerve in my body was on fire. I realized my hands were still clenched in fists of rage. My right hand was starting to swell a little, and I was having a hard time just trying to straighten my fingers. I needed to try and calm myself down. I took some deep breaths and tried to relax. "You shouldn't have done that. We didn't do anything," she said with a shaky voice. "Bullshit," I exclaimed. "You're trying to tell me you were with him for 3.5 hours and all you did was sit in the car and kiss? What the hell kind of fool do you take me for, anyway? When I first saw that car, you were coming north on Graceland. There's that little motel just a couple miles down the road. You really going to tell me you weren't at that motel?" "No, we weren't at any motel. He took me out for some drinks, that's all. He was a nice guy, so when he took me back to my car, I kissed him. That's all that happened." "Yeah, I believe that, like I believe a rabid dog won't bite my hand if I wave in front of his face. I suppose you weren't screwing Kevin either." Joanne's face went literally white. I could see the little wheels turning in that brain of hers. How is she going to try and lie her way out of this, I wondered. What makes you think I was screwing Kevin?" she sobbed. "You told me," I said. Her green eyes widened. "What are talking about? I never told you Kevin and I were having an affair." "Sure you did, at the Christmas party last year. I was wondering why Kevin and Samantha didn't come. They hadn't missed a party in years. When I asked you why they weren't coming, you said they had a previous engagement, but at the party, when Beverly asked about them, you told her Samantha threatened to scratch your eyes out if she ever saw you again. Either you just forgot about me standing next to you when you said that, or you just didn't care. Now, there's only one reason I can think of for one married woman to want to scratch out the eyes of another woman, especially when they were good friends before that." I could see Joanne trying to come up with a good lie, but she was trapped and she knew it. She offered no explanation. She just sat there, looking at me and sobbing. "Since you would even say that to Bev must mean she knew about you guys, right? How many other people knew? Huh? How many more of our so-called friends knew you were out screwing around behind my back?" I wanted to sit down but couldn't. I couldn't relax enough to sit down. "Now I know why you wanted that job. It finally dawned on me. I couldn't figure it out. You didn't even want to keep modeling after we were married. Then, all of a sudden, you just had to get a part-time job at the bank, all of 12 hours a week. Now I get it. That was just about the time when Kevin and Samantha moved away, isn't it? Sure. You wanted to get out of the house so you could find yourself a new boyfriend. It wasn't like that, she said in a feeble attempt at a defense. Yeah, right, I said. Too bad Samantha found out. At least Kevin was a man. The a-hole you were with tonight was crying like a little baby when I left him. She was still sitting on the bed sniveling when I went into the master bath adjacent to the bedroom and ran some cold water over my hand for a few minutes. She was dabbing at her eyes and nose with a tissue when I walked back into the room. I'm sure the cops will be here any minute. Don't bother posting bail. I'll get my folks to do that. As soon as the squads pull up, I need you to go downstairs and keep the kids away from the front window. I'll go out in the yard and meet them there. I don't want the kids to see their daddy being let off in handcuffs. Joanne started to cry harder again. I guess from visualizing the scene neither of us wanted the kids to see. What are you going to do? I mean, when you get out, what do you think I'm going to do? I could hear myself swearing, something I never did in the house, but I just couldn't help it. God, I was just so damn angry. I'm going to file for a divorce. Just then I heard the pitter-patter of little feet and knew both Linda and Lisa were on their way up the stairs. Mom, Dad, is everything okay? Lisa asked. Damn, I thought, this is going to be so hard on the kids. They're always the ones that suffer the most in situations like this. I felt so damn guilty about how this was going to hurt them, and now I had to lie to them for the third time tonight. Honey, everything is fine. Do you have all your homework done? I asked, hoping to get them involved with something else for the moment. Yes, Daddy, she answered, looking around me and seeing her mother on the bed still crying. Okay, honey, how about if you go downstairs and get a bowl of ice cream for you and your sister, then pick out one of your movies and sit and watch it with her? I said, trying to mask the anger still in my voice. Mommy and Daddy are talking right now. Okay, honey? I knew Lisa was too smart to accept my lies anymore. She knew her mother and I were fighting. I was hoping Linda wouldn't pick up on it and get even more upset than she already was. Lisa took Linda's hand. Just before she turned to walk her little sister back down the stairs, I could see tears forming in the biggest, most beautiful blues eyes God ever gave to a little girl. This was the reason I had stayed with Joan for so long. The girls, it was tearing my heart out knowing what I'm about to put them through. That, and of course, I still loved the bitch. God help me. I walked to our bedroom window and parted the floor-to-ceiling vertical blinds with my swollen fingers to look for police cars. What are you doing? Asked Joanne, her voice still shaky but with tears now subsiding some. I'm looking for the cops, I answered. I thought they would probably be here by now. Do you want to get arrested? Was Joanne's stupid question. No, of course not, but I don't want them coming in the house. This is going to be hard enough on the girls without them watching me get arrested. Damn it. I was so frustrated at the whole situation. The whole damn night was a nightmare. I couldn't just sit around waiting, I thought. Maybe I should go down to the station. I wonder if Tom is on duty tonight? Tom was a long-time member of our police force and a friend for years. We would sometimes go target shooting together, as well as play an occasional game of golf. I first tried his cell phone, but it went to voicemail. The department didn't allow the officers to carry their cell phones with them while they were on duty, so I dialed the non-emergency number for the cops. The desk sergeant picked up and introduced himself. Hello, I said without giving my name. Can you tell me if Tom Cummings is on duty tonight? I asked. Tom? Said the voice on the other end. Sure, he just walked in. Wait a minute, I'll get him. Tom, I heard the sergeant yell. Yeah, phone. Okay, I heard Tom yell back. Hello, this is Officer Cummings. Can I help you? Tom, it's Chris. How are you doing? I said. Hey, old buddy, what's up? Can you check real quick and see if there is a warrant out for me? I asked. There was a short silence from the other end. Warrant? Why would there be a warrant out for you? Well, I had a little altercation tonight, I said. I think I hurt the guy bad enough that he would have had to go to the ER. I'm sure they would have called you guys and reported it, so I'm figuring I should see squad cars any minute now, most likely with a warrant for assault and battery. Chris, I just got back from taking a statement from a guy in the ER. He said he was mugged in front of the bank on Graceland. Yeah, that was me, I said. He said he was mugged? He didn't mention me? Nope, not a thing about you. He told me he was mugged by two guys, but he didn't know why. Supposedly they just came out of nowhere and beat him up for no reason. You want to tell me what this is all about? Said Tom. I caught the son of a bitch with Joe and smooching in his car. That's what it's all about. I pulled the a-hole out of the car and decked him a couple of times. Joanne looked at me. I guess she couldn't believe I was telling Tom about her infidelity. Don't look at me like that, I told her. It's bad enough I'm lying to our kids, I'm not going to lie to Tom. He asked what happened, so I told him. Tom was still on the other end of the phone listening. Well, listen, pal, he said. I really don't think you have anything to worry about. Why is that? I said, a little surprised. He has to know who I am. You don't think he's going to press charges? No, I don't. His wife was at the hospital. How is he going to name you as the person who beat him up without telling his wife why you did it? I looked at my still sobbing wife. Did you know A-hole is married? I asked her. She had her head in her hands again and was moving her head, but I couldn't tell if she was shaking it yes, no, or it was just moving from her crying. Well, that's at least one thing I don't have to worry about tonight. I was so afraid you guys would come into the house and put the cuffs on me in front of Lisa and Linda. I told him, come on, old buddy. I'd never let them do that to you. If it's any consolation, you got him pretty good. You cracked a rib, broke his nose, knocked out one tooth, and loosened some more. Unfortunately, Tom, that doesn't put my marriage back together. But you're right, I said with a small grin. It does make me feel a little bit better. Hey, could you get me a copy of the police report? Yeah. If you promise you won't anything stupid, he said. No, nothing stupid, but it might help if I have his name and address for Larry, my attorney, I said. Maybe I'll even frame it and show it to my second wife as a warning. I said with as much venom as I could put into my voice while looking straight at my wife. Okay, said Tom. I'll get you a copy. No problem. Hey, do you think you could do me one more favor? I asked, pushing my luck. Well, it depends on what it is, he said. You know that little motel on Graceland a couple miles south of the bank? Joanne quickly raised her head up from her hands and looked at me with terror in her face. Do you think you could run by there and see if they have a registration card for A-hole and my wife? She won't tell me where they went, but I figure that would be the most convenient place, and they were coming from that direction when I saw him driving up. Yeah, that's not a problem. We're over there all the time for one thing or another. I know the desk clerk. If that's where they went, I'll get you the proof. What are you going to do for tonight? Are you going to be okay? He asked. I'm sure Mary won't mind if you want crash with us for a couple days. I appreciate that, Tom. Thanks, but I'll be okay. Lisa and Linda know something is wrong, so I'm just going to stay here tonight. Hopefully they'll feel a little better if they see me here in the morning. This is going to be so hard on them, Tom. Yeah, I know, Chris. I'm so sorry. I wish there was more I could do. Thanks. Unfortunately, there isn't much anyone can do anymore. I'll give you a call tomorrow. Maybe we can go out for a drink, and I can pick up the police report and that motel registry card if there is one. The way my wife just looked at me when I mentioned it, though, I'm sure it'll be there. We each said goodbye. I closed my phone and looked back at my wife, whose face had now gone from sorrow to anger. You just had to embarrass me by having Tom go to the motel, didn't you? Damn it. Why can't you just take my word for it? Why do you always have to be right? Because you've proven over and over that your word is no good. Why are you worried? You just told me you weren't there. All right, damn it. Yes, we were there. We screwed for hours. Is that what you wanted to hear? No, Joanne, that's exactly what I was hoping not to hear. I just don't understand. I loved you with all my heart. Why? You don't love me. You love your work, your photography. You're either at the studio or you're on location somewhere with some gorgeous young model. And if you're not there, you're at the damn college, teaching. You haven't touched me in years. What do you care who I sleep with anyway? You're married to your job. You're a photographer. It's who you are. Her trembling voice exuding the stress of the night. Geez, I just don't believe it. We've been together for 12 years, and you don't have a clue as to who I am, I said. Being a photographer isn't who I am. It's what I do. Yes, I am one of the lucky men who actually makes a living at doing something he enjoys, but it's far from who I am. I had been pacing back and forth all night. I finally sat down on the bed next to Joanne. Who I am is the guy who fell in love with you the minute he saw you. Who I am is a loving father and husband who hates spending time away from his wife and kids and who would give anything to be with them day and night, but who knows he can't do that because he has responsibilities and obligations as head of the house. How do you think I get the money for all this? I have a wife who just has to redecorate the house every 6 months, who has to have new furniture every year, who has to go to buy clothes for her young children, who had to go out to buy a horse, for Pete's sake, because her girlfriend had one. Now my own eyes were starting to tear. You got a whole closet full of expensive clothes, I said, gesturing at the closet with my hand. And yet, every time we go anywhere, you tell me you don't have anything to wear. Yes, I'm at the studio shooting one assignment after another all day long. Then I have to sit in the back editing half the night when all I can think of is how I wish I was home with my family. When I'm on location someplace, I sit in my motel room at night lonely and depressed because I miss my family and I can't wait to get home. And yes, I took the job teaching at the college at night because one day we're going to turn around and our own kids will be going to college and somebody has to pay for it. You really think I do all that because I don't love you? Shit, You and the girls are all I think about. You're my whole life, you and the kids, not the studio. Now it was my voice breaking up and I had to wipe my nose with a tissue. As pissed off as I was, I knew divorcing my wife was going to be the hardest thing I ever had to do. As far as not touching you, hell, every time I reached for you at night, you'd tell me you weren't in the mood. I finally got tired of being rejected by my own wife all the time, so I figured I'd let you make the first move, but you never did. Not once in 2 years did you ever reach for me in the night, or try to initiate sex in any way. Shit, you didn't care enough to even ask me if there was something wrong. Every night for months I prayed that you'd reach over and just give me a touch. That's all it would take, just a touch, but you never did. Finally, I just gave up. Joanne had her head lowered when I looked at her. That's who I am, Joanne. That's who I am, just a simple, hard-working guy who loves you and his kids with every fiber in his body. That's who I am. Joanne looked at me like she never saw me before. You're going to tell me you went on those 2- and 3-day trips with all those young models, and you never once slept with one of them. Remember me, I was a model for years. I know what goes on at night on those location shoots. Not once, Joanne. I looked her straight in her teary, green, photogenic eyes. Not one time have ever I cheated on you with anyone. Not once. At least she knew me well enough that she could see in my face I was telling the truth. She lowered her eyes again, and I believe I could hear true regret in her voice. I'm sorry, she said. I really am sorry. I don't want a divorce. I promise, no more cheating ever. And we can make love all the time if you want, but I don't want to get a divorce. Well, I'm sorry too, Joanne, but I'm not giving you a choice in the matter. I'm calling Larry tomorrow morning to get the paperwork started. I couldn't believe her face showed shock as she looked back up at me. What did you expect, Joanne? I said, geez, you didn't even have the courtesy to lie to me. She looked at me, and I knew she didn't know what I was talking about. After all, she'd been lying to me for years. Tonight, I said, if you had called and said you were going out with the girls after work, or had a meeting or just about anything, that would have been one thing. I would have been suspicious, but I probably wouldn't have gone looking for you. But you didn't. You just didn't come home. No call, no nothing. You just didn't give a damn. You didn't give me enough respect to even try to keep it from me. What did you think I was going to do? Just sit around and twiddle my thumbs, wondering where my beautiful wife was. And now you don't want a divorce. That's make no sense. You obviously don't love me. You sure as hell don't respect me. That's not true. I do respect you, very much, and I do still love you. Somewhere things just got screwed up. I don't know how it happened, but it did. That doesn't mean we can't fix it, Chris. Think of the children. What it would do to them if we got divorced. Oh, now you want me to think of the children. And when did you think of the children when you were out screwing around? I've been thinking of the kids for years now. It's the only thing that's kept me from divorcing up till now. We certainly weren't going to settle anything. Not then anyway. Look, it's getting late, I said. It's already way past the kids' bedtime. Do you think you can pull yourself together enough so we can both put the kids to bed? Joanne went into the bathroom and washed her face. In a couple minutes, we both went downstairs. As we walked around the front of the couch, there they were, both cuddled together and sound asleep. I had to turn away, my face scrunched up in the pain of knowing my life, as I knew it for the last 11 years, would soon be coming to an end. Silently, I just kept asking myself why didn't she love me like I loved her? I raised my left hand to wipe the tears from my eyes. I felt her hand on my back. It'll be all right, honey. We'll work through this. It'll be okay. I'll be right back, I said as I headed for the downstairs washroom. Now I had to rinse my face. We had to wake the kids to get them into their pajamas and get them to bed, and I didn't want them to see me crying either. I composed myself, and together, we tucked them into bed, kissed them goodnight, and went back downstairs. How about if I put on a pot of coffee and we talk? Joanne said. I'm done talking for the night. I was going to stay here tonight, but I just can't. I'm going to go down to that little motel on Dempster and spend the night there. I'll be back in the morning before the kids get up. Chris, don't do that, please. Stay here. I want to make love to you tonight. It's been so long. I want us to reconnect. You really believe I would take sloppy seconds after that, a-hole? I was shocked as I heard my own voice, the intensity of emotion, the hatred, maybe not for Joanne, but certainly for what she did. It was all coming out. Joanne was shocked as well. I think she finally got it as she looked into my face and saw the pain I was going through. I had never talked to Joanne that way before. I think it scared her. I know it scared me. Honey, don't honey me, I said, raising my voice again. Just don't say anything right now. This marriage is over. It's dead and you killed it, I said. I was getting furious all over again. I had to get out of there. I turned and went upstairs. I threw a few things in a bag, then went down the stairs and out the front door without another word. I checked into the motel and left a 6 a.m. wake-up call. Joanne would be getting the kids up at 7:30. That would give me plenty of time to shower, have some breakfast, and be at the house for the kids when they woke up. As it turned out, it was for nothing. I didn't sleep a wink all night. I laid there, wondering if there was some way I could salvage my marriage. I always came up with the same answer: no way in hell. As much as I loved Joanne, I would never be able to trust her. Never. The motel phone rang promptly at 6 a.m., and a cheery fellow on the other end announced my wake call. I showered, put on some clean clothes, and checked out before hitting Denny's for breakfast. I had devised a short-term plan of action. There was a bed and a couple rooms in the back of my photography studio where I could bunk for a little while until I found an apartment. After the kids left for school, I would pack some clothes and things and get set up there. Tonight, when they get home from school, I would do the hardest thing I have ever had to do in my life: tell my children their mother and I are getting a divorce. I walked into the house a little after 7. There, dressed in the same clothes she was wearing the night before, was Joanne, sitting at the kitchen table just as I left her, but now staring into a cup of coffee. As she lifted her head to look at me, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. The way she's been acting, I really didn't think it was going to be this hard on her. She didn't say a word, just followed me with her eyes as I walked over and poured myself a cup of coffee. I sat down on the opposite side of the table. "Have you been sitting here all night?" I asked. She slowly nodded her head yes. "Are you still so angry?" She asked me. "Do you think we can talk? I don't have anything scheduled until 11:30, so we can talk after we get the kids off to school, but it won't do any good, Joanne. We're done." "Chris, you don't mean that. We can work this out. Look, I admit I've done some bad things, terrible things. I showed you no respect and literally treated you like dirt at times. I've been sitting here all night trying to figure out why, because, in spite of what you might think, I do respect you and I do love you very much. Joanne, we'll be getting the kids up in just a few minutes. Let's not talk about it until we get them off to school," I said. For the next 15 minutes, we sat in silence, each sipping our coffee. It's amazing how many thoughts can go through a person's head in a short period of time. Again, for the umpteenth time in the last 12 hours, I wondered if there was a way, any way to save my marriage. I glanced up from my cup and looked into my wife's beautiful face. A tear broke free from her eye and come to rest on an already tear-stained, high cheekbone. There it rested briefly before gravity forced it on the rest of its journey, ending on the top of the hard kitchen table. I took a deep breath, started to stand. "What do you say we get the kids up, huh?" "Yeah," my wife replied, taking one last sip of her coffee. As hard as I thought it was going to be to keep it together while Joe and I got the kids up and off to school, it was harder, much harder. I almost lost it as we walked into their bedroom and I looked into their angel-like, innocent faces. I almost lost it again as I bent over and kissed them on the forehead while gently shaking them to wake up. I went downstairs and started breakfast while Joe and stayed upstairs and got them washed and dressed. We all had what I knew was our last breakfast as a family, and it took every ounce of courage I had to keep from falling apart as I hugged and kissed them both before Joe and I put them on the school bus. This was the morning routine I had grown to love so much. "Come on," said Joanne, turning to go back into the house. "We have to talk. We're both adults. I know we can work this out." I gathered up the breakfast dishes and put them in the washer as Joanne rationed out the last of the coffee, then made another pot. She took both cups. "Let's go in the living room and talk. It's more comfortable," she said, turning and walking in that direction. She sat down on the couch with me sitting down next to her as she set the coffee cups down on the table in front of us. "I've been up all night wondering why I did the things I did," she started. "I'm not making excuses. I know there is no excuse for what I've done to you and our marriage, but I believe I know the reasons." Her hand was shaking as she reached for her coffee. "When we met, we both had kind of an exciting life. You were wheeling and dealing every day, building up your business, and my modeling career was going well. Hell, I had 3 covers in 1 year, just before meeting you." I sat and listened, praying she would say something that would make all the hurt go away. She continued. "When we got married, my life changed drastically. I know, it was my decision to give up modeling, but it was because I wanted to settle down and make a life with you, have a family with you. But your life didn't change, not like mine did. I don't know what I expected. I really don't. I knew your studio was your livelihood, our livelihood, but it was like my life had changed so significantly. I guess I just figured yours would too. But yours didn't. Your life was still exciting. You were still traveling and doing what you love to do. I was jealous, Chris. That jealousy somehow turned to anger, and I wanted to strike out and hurt you." She shifted her body to face me more. "I started to think about the opportunities you had to sleep with other models. I'd have coffee with some of my girlfriends and tell them I thought you were sleeping around on me, and they just supported my suspicions, telling me you were a man. What did I expect? I literally convinced myself you were having affairs so I could justify having one myself. At that point, she broke into tears and just repeated she was so sorry. I put my arm around her and pulled her to me, kissing her on her forehead. I took the, now empty, coffee cup from her hand before she dropped it and held her tight. Once again, tears were welling up in my own eyes. After giving her a few minutes to settle down, I went into the kitchen to fill our cups with some fresh coffee. When I returned, she proceeded. I did have an affair with Kevin for almost a year. It wasn't until 2 or 3 months after we both broke it off that he confessed the whole thing to Samantha. I thought sure she was going to call you, but she never did. She just told me she didn't ever want to see or hear from me again. And, yes, Bev did know, but she was the only one who knew, honest. I sat there trying to absorb everything. I was trying to understand. I could actually understand the jealousy part because I was always a little jealous of her being able to stay home with the kids all the time. How ironic, I thought. What about last night? What about the guy I decked? He works at the bank. He's a loan officer. We had been together a few times before, but always while you were out of town. To tell you the truth, I thought and thought and thought about it. I have no idea why I didn't call and say I'd be late. Maybe I wanted to get caught. Maybe I needed to get caught. I don't know. I do know how guilty I always felt right after we were done. Okay, I said. Look, it's getting late, and I have to get down to the studio. I had planned on taking my clothes with me, then coming back tonight, so we could tell the kids together that we were getting divorced. I'm still going to take some clothes with me and stay at the studio for a couple days, but I just don't know what to do yet. I hate to do this to you, but I still have a lot of thinking to do, Joanne. I'm telling you right now, though, I wouldn't get my hopes up. I just don't see us staying together. Not at this point anyway. When the kids come home, tell them I'm out of town. I need some time to think. I went upstairs and got some clothes. Joanne was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs. I know I screwed up, Chris, she said, but I don't want to lose you. Please, give me a second chance. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and left. For the next 3 days, every waking hour was consumed with thoughts of my situation. I even canceled all my shoots, telling my clients I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a lie. I felt like crap all day and all night, and there was no way I could concentrate anyway. I wanted so much to put my marriage back together. I thought about a trial separation, marriage counseling, or just flat pretending as if nothing happened. It always came down to one word, though: trust. She lied to me for so long, even the other night. After being caught red-handed, she found it so easy to lie to me. No matter how much I loved her, no matter how much I loved my kids, it would never work. I would spend the rest of my life wondering where she was, what was she doing, and was she doing it with somebody else? I couldn't live like that. It would kill me. That's exactly what I told her when I returned to the house. I think she expected it and tried to prepare herself because she took it better than I thought she would. I called Larry, my attorney from the house, and told him to start the paperwork. The house was paid for. I would give it to Joanne with no strings attached. She would also get everything in the house except what little camera gear I kept there, my golf clubs, and personal items. Joanne asked if she could keep the wedding album, and I said of course she could. We discussed telling the kids and decided we would wait one more day. Tomorrow was Friday. I would come by after school and we would tell the kids together. Then I would take them for the weekend and show them I would still be their dad and still be part of their lives. 3 weeks later, I found a 2-bedroom condo just 1.5 miles from the house. I took the larger bedroom and put in twin beds for the girls and flat-screen TV. Joanne gave me some of their pictures and things to hang on the wall so it would feel more like home to them. Joanne was extremely generous with visiting rights. Even though the court gave me every other weekend, Joanne let me have them almost every weekend, and I would sometimes come over in the evenings to help them with their homework. This is not the end. There really is no end. Kids grow up, life goes on, passions sometimes die. Only one thing has remained a constant. Love still burns in my broken heart. Chicago's winter weather certainly wasn't doing anything for my disposition. It was only 4:30 and already it was dark outside. I locked the front door to my photography studio and braced the bone-chilling cold as I almost slipped on the icy sidewalk. The raw January wind came whipping in from off of Lake Michigan and immediately froze the nasty scowl that I wore on my face as I trudged through the deep snow, sludge, and slop on the way to my car. Whatever happened to the happy-go-lucky Chris Parker who used to occupy this body, I thought. It seemed I was always pissed off lately. Today I lost half a day's shooting because some idiot account exec screwed up the schedule. Things like that happen from time to time, but in the mood I'm in, well, it just seems like every little problem becomes monumental lately. It's not like I don't know what's wrong. I just spent my first Christmas as a bachelor and I absolutely hated it. If I had a penny for every time I've second-guessed myself for going ahead with the divorce, I'd never have to work again for the rest of my life. I know Joe and would love to have me come back. When I picked up my daughters, Lisa and Linda, on Christmas morning they told me they could hear their mother quietly crying in her bedroom the night before. It was the first Christmas Eve since we met that we were not together. I didn't tell the kids, but she wasn't the only one crying that night. What's even worse is what my daughters are going through. Don't get me wrong, they've both been brave little troopers, but I know inside they're hurting. They would normally be screaming and jumping all over the place on Christmas morning as they opened their presents, but not this year. This year they smiled and thanked me with their kisses, but I could read their thoughts, see it in their eyes. The only Christmas present they wanted was for their mother and me to be back together and have everything as it was. Seeing my kids in that kind of pain, knowing the pain my wife is going through, and the pain and doubt I feel every single day, yeah, I knew the reasons I was not my happy-go-lucky self. I could only pray that, in time, it would get a little easier for everyone. Day by day life goes on. I just wondered, on what day does the pain start to hurt less? As got into my car and sat while it warmed up a little, I thought even small decisions were getting harder to make. Tonight I had class. 3 nights a week, I taught a class on creative photography at our city college. I started there 3 years ago and had put every dollar I made into a college fund for the girls. It had always been fun for me. The kids always challenged me, kept me on my toes, and forced me to stay up to date with their questions concerning new equipment and techniques. Lately, however, just like everything else, it was becoming more of a headache and I was seriously thinking about making this my last year. So, decision time. Should I fight rush hour traffic and go home to my empty, 2-bedroom condo in the burbs, fix myself something to eat and relax a little before going to class? Or should I eat downtown and wait for traffic to clear then go straight to class from here? Oh hell, I thought, I haven't cussed it out or given anyone the finger all day. I think I'll fight my way through the traffic and just go home now. Later that evening I sat on the corner of my desk, as I most often do, and watched the kids file in and take their seats. As she walked past me, Laura Benson leaned toward me and quietly asked if she could see me after class. Assuming I knew the subject of our upcoming conversation, I told her I had nothing planned after class, so it would be no problem. Laura was a gorgeous young lady. She was intelligent, had a wonderful personality, lustrous blonde hair, beautiful high cheekbones, and a knockout figure. I had talked to her earlier in the semester about a career in modeling, but at the time she didn't seem too interested. I was sure she had changed her mind and was now considering my proposal. I had used unknown models before and gave several their start in the profession through the years. I never asked nor expected anything in return. Just watching them succeed in the business was reward enough. After class, Laura waited at her desk until most of the others had left, then approached me at the front of the room. "Maybe we can go out for a drink," she said, still keeping her voice low. I was a little stunned at her offer. Laura was only 21 and I was coming up on 40. What would people think? Still, I had been so damn depressed lately. Maybe a couple drinks with a beautiful blonde was just what I needed to lift my spirits. "Sure," I said. "How about Plato's on Touhy Avenue?" "That's perfect," she said. "I'll meet you there." I was already sitting at the bar when Laura walked in. "What would you like?" I asked. "A white wine would be great, thank you," she said. I gave the bartender her order and took a sip of my vodka and tonic. I expected her to sit down on the stool next to me, but she stood until the bartender brought her drink. Looking over at the tables in the darkest corner of the bar, she asked, "Can we sit over there?" Not even waiting for confirmation, she picked up her glass of wine and started walking. I slipped off my seat and followed behind. Once at the table of her choosing, I set my glass down, then, always the gentleman, moved over to pull her chair out for her. I wondered if the younger guys still did things like that as she smiled at me with a nod of gratitude. I had to notice the difference in her demeanor. In school, other than being the prettiest girl in any of my classes, she was like any of my other students, listening to my lectures and asking questions. But now, in this kind of an atmosphere, she seemed much more mature, more womanly, more confident. I started the conversation. "Laura, I'm assuming you've changed your mind about modeling." "In 2 weeks I have it," she interrupted. "No, Chris, that's not what this is about." Now I was confused. She called me Chris. I guess she felt comfortable in the informal surroundings, but I wasn't sure I felt the same way. She was still a student. "Okay," I said. "What's up? There is a rumor going around the school that you're getting a divorce. Is that true?" Now I had absolutely no idea where this conversation was leading. The subject of my divorce was certainly the last thing I expected. I was taken aback to know a student of mine even knew this much about my personal life. I was definitively uneasy talking about it, but my curiosity was piqued now. I had to know where this conversation was going. I thought I'd tell her just a little without going into any real details that was none of her business. Well, almost, I said. The divorce won't actually be final for another 3 months. May I ask how you knew about my divorce? I heard it from some of the other kids. It's pretty much common knowledge at the campus. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry, she said, but from the first day in your class, I thought you were someone I'd like to know better. I knew you were married, so I never said anything to you, but when I heard you were getting a divorce, well, I guess you'd say I want to throw my hat into the ring. I think I just sat there with my mouth hanging open for a few minutes. I had no idea my personal life was such a popular topic of discussion on campus. On top of that, did my 21-year-old photography student just proposition me? I knew there were about 1,000,001 reasons why I should stop this before it starts, but I'll be damned if I could think of one at the moment. Ah, Laura, this is, unbelievably flattering. I said, bumbling over my words like a sex-starved teenager, but I'm almost 20 years older than you. She seemed to sit back in her chair a little bit. Yes, and what's your point? She said. I was trying to remember just what my point was, when I felt something. I looked down and saw her stocking and closed toes feeling around my crotch. I can only imagine the expression on my face as I looked back up at her. I'm assuming it was comical because Laura chuckled to herself with a wicked little laugh. It had been a long time. I know friends could never understand why I wasn't sleeping with half the models I worked with. The truth was, I would never even considered it. Unlike a lot of the other photographers that worked with models, I always kept work separate from pleasure. As soon as a photographer started sleeping with one of his models, she started expecting special treatment. That usually resulted in the photographer insisting she get the best assignments whether she was right for the job or not, and that meant disappointed and pissed off clients. It never failed. Whenever a photographer started screwing one of the models, it caused problems for the photographer, his customers, and his work suffered as a result of it. In the end, the model would start to feel used and trash the photographer and his reputation and probably hurt her own reputation in the process. Nope, it just wasn't worth it, not as far as I was concerned. There was one exception, of course, Joanne. Joanne was 1 in a million. I fell in love with her from the moment I saw her. The first time she stepped into the studio, my heart pounded so hard I thought it would jump from my chest. From that moment, I knew I would marry her. Never had that happen before, or since. If it ever happened again, I guess I would make an exception once again, but somehow I just knew it never would. She looked at me with a mischievous little smile. Well? She asked. Well, I said, I think this is something we should be discussing at my place. She moved her foot down and slipped it back into her shoe. She looked at me and motioned for me to come closer. She brought her lips to mine and smiled as she gently bit my lower lip. Tonight I am going to screw your brains out, she said quietly. Come on, she said, let's take your car. It was a short, 10-minute drive to my condo, but I think I experienced every emotion in the human psyche in that length of time. I doubted my decision-making. I kept asking myself, what the hell am I doing? She's half my age and a student. I felt guilty. This is the first time I've been with another woman besides my wife in over 12 years. I was nervous. I hadn't made love to any woman in a long time. Does a guy get rusty? I was worried. What if I disappoint her? I'm sure she's used to younger men. But most of all, I was excited. Damn, I'm going to get laid. I asked her if I could get her something as we walked into my place. Yeah, she said, naked. I tuned to face her. She really was a beautiful woman. I caressed her hair with one hand as I reached around her small waist with my other. She looked into my eyes as I pulled her closer. I slowly closed the gap between her inviting lips and my own. I showed her the way to the bedroom and approached her from behind. Laura looked at me and gestured with her finger for me to come closer. We had wild sex. I gently explored her body as we laid together, each of us coming down from our night of passion. For just an instant, a picture of Joe and seeing us like this flashed through my brain, filling me with guilt, but I forced it from my mind and started to tenderly kiss Laura all over. I couldn't live the rest of my life as a pissed-off divorced man. I had to get on with my life. We laid there, our bodies intertwined with each other's. I was hoping she would spend the evening and I would not feel the loneliness of an empty bed for one night, but it was not to be. I have to get going, Chris. You're welcome to spend the night. I make a pretty mean steak and eggs for breakfast, I said, trying to make her an offer she couldn't refuse. I can't, she said. I'm a terrible grouch in the morning. I don't want you to see me like that, at least not yet. Besides, I have a ton of things to do early in the morning. No, as much as I would love to spend the night, I can't. I tried not to sound too disappointed. Okay, I said, I understand. You just want to use my body for sex. I smiled to make sure she knew I was kidding. She laughed. That's right, she said. Any complaints? Not a one. By the time I got Laura back to her car, it was after 2 in the morning. Plato's parking lot was dark and cold. I told Laura to start her car, then come back to mine as we sat long enough to let her car warm up. After a few minutes, she drove from the parking lot. I watched her tail lights disappear as she drove down the deserted street. I just sat there for a few minutes. I was too worked up to go back home, so I went to a Denny's to think over several cups of coffee. I just had a wonderful time with a gorgeous young lady, so why couldn't I just revel in my nirvana and be happy? Because after 12 years of loving someone, you don't just turn it off like a switch. For the second time tonight, I felt the pangs of guilt. I thought about what Joanne said, how guilty she felt after sleeping with someone. I wondered if she felt more or less guilty than I feel right now. This isn't fair, I thought. I'm the injured party here. I shouldn't feel guilty at all. I need to get on with my life. How am I going to do that if I feel guilty every time I enjoy someone's company? I smiled to myself and took another sip of coffee. The next month was actually kind of fun. I could feel myself getting closer to that happy-go-lucky guy I used to be. Joanne seemed like she was finally accepting the fact that we were not going to get back together, and we were getting to the point where we could talk to each other normally when I came to pick up the kids. I always had something exciting planned for the weekends with Lisa, and Linda and Laura came over 2 or 3 times during the week to screw my brains out. Even the weather was starting to break a little. Most of the snow and slush had melted, and the temperature was above the freezing mark. You know what you haven't done in a long time? I told myself. Gone out on a date. Yup, all the times Laura and I were in bed together, and I've never taken her out on a date. That's something I must remedy right now, I thought to myself. I picked up my cell phone and hit the speed dial for her number. Laura saw the ID. Hey baby, she said in her normal, upbeat tone of voice. Are you horny again already? Well, now that you mention it, yeah, but that's not what I'm calling you about, I said. I heard her chuckling on the other end. What are you doing Wednesday evening? I asked. Wednesday? Nothing that I can think of right now. Babe, why? Because I happen to think the closest thing we've had to a date was the one drink at Plato's we had that first night together. A date? You want to take me out on a date? Aren't you sweet? She said. I'd love to out. Where are you taking me? Well, Cats is showing at the Blackstone. I thought we could grab a nice dinner downtown then take in the play. After that, of course, go back to my place and screw like bunnies. Again she chuckled. That sounds like a perfect evening to me, she said. It's a date. I made all the arrangements and was looking forward to a great evening. For a guy whose job it is to look at beautiful women all day, I have to say I was flabbergasted when Laura answered her door. I had never seen her all dressed up. Her blonde, shoulder-length hair framed her face to perfection. Her hazel blue eyes absolutely sparkled, and it didn't take a lot of imagination to realize she was wearing no underwear under that black, slinky dress. Holy cow, Laura, I said. You are unbelievably, just breathtakingly stunning. The ends of her full lips went up, and she broke into a wide smile. Thank you, Chris. The evening was going fantastic. The restaurant I picked out was romantic and elegant. The wine list was extensive, and the food fit for a gourmet's palate. Laura was absolutely charming. She was well-versed on a variety of subjects, and her sense of humor gave her a down-to-earth quality in spite of her extraordinary good looks. Then it happened. My eyes were glued on Laura, so it was from her voice that I first realized Beverly and her husband Jim were standing next to our table. Chris, Beverly's voice crackled. I can't believe this. The first time Jim has taken me out in 6 months, and we run into you. How are you doing? Jim was an okay guy, but I never liked Beverly. She and Joanne had been friends since grade school, so I was always pleasant to her, but I just couldn't stand her attitude. She was the most cynical person I ever saw. She could look into the face of an angel and find a pimple. She was also the person who was aware of Joanne's affairs and, I suspected, even encouraged them. That alone made me mistrust as well as dislike her. Still being the gentleman my father taught me to be, I stood to greet them. Bev, Jim, how are you? I asked. Bev's eyes immediately went to Laura. Laura, I started the introductions. This is Beverly and Jim Hall, 2 old friends. Laura batted her big blue eyes and put out her hand to greet them both. We all exchanged pleasantries and talked for a few minutes. Jim and Bev both expressed their sadness over the breakup of my marriage before they left for their own table and sat down. Damn, I thought, of all the people who we could have run into tonight, they were the last I'd hoped to see. I wasn't hiding the fact that I was dating, but I didn't want to rub Joanne's face in it either. Even though it would probably hurt her feelings, I knew Bev wouldn't be able to contain herself and would surely tell Joanne about seeing me with someone else. The rest of the evening was unspoiled. I found out on the way home from the Blackstone that Laura had never been to the theater before and had enjoyed her first experience immensely. Once we got back to my place, she showed her gratitude in a different way and long into the night. The following day, even though I had no shooting assignment scheduled, I had a very busy day. When you're in business for yourself, you sometimes have to wear many hats: salesman, secretary, wardrobe specialist, set designer, carpenter, photo editor, production manager, you name it. That Thursday, I was all of those and more. About 3:30 in the afternoon, my cell phone rang. I could see by the display it was the home phone. "Hello," I answered. "Daddy." I could tell immediately there was something wrong. It sounded like she was trying to hold back tears and keep from crying. "Lisa, honey, what's wrong?" "Daddy." Now I could hear her definitively crying. "Could you come home?" I wasn't sure if she meant move back and live there again or just come to the house. "What's the matter, honey?" I said with urgency. "Daddy, Mommy's in her bedroom crying and she won't let me in. She's been in there since we got home from school. I'm scared, Daddy. She just tells us to leave her alone for right now, but I'm scared. Can you please come home, Daddy? Please." "Honey, I'm leaving right now, but it will be a little while before I can get there." "Don't worry, honey. I'm sure your mother's fine, just a little sad right now. Why don't you get some milk and cookies for you and your sister? Don't bother your mom until I get there, honey. Okay?" "Okay, Daddy, but please hurry. I'm walking out the door right now, honey. I'll be there as fast as I can." I hopped in my car and was on the northbound Kennedy and nothing flat. Damn, I thought, I know exactly what this is about. Good old Beverly couldn't keep it to herself for even a day. I know damn well she told Joan all about seeing Laura and me last night. Not only is that bitch cynical, I thought, but she's sadistic as well. When I walked into the house, both girls ran to me and threw their arms around me with tears in their eyes. I asked if their mother had come downstairs yet, and they said no. I tried to assure them that everything would be all right, but only seeing their mother without her crying was going to do that. I went into the kitchen and fixed the kids a sandwich, then helped them get started on their homework before going upstairs. When I reached the door to the bedroom, I could hear Joan still sobbing. I knocked. "Honey, give Mommy just a few more minutes, then I'll come down and get us something to eat." "Okay?" "Joan, it's me," I said through the closed door. "Chris? What are you doing here? Can I come in?" I could hear her moving on the bed. No, don't come in. I'm a mess. I don't want you to see me like this," she said, almost panicking. I opened the door anyway and walked in. Joanne was sitting on the bed with her face in her hands. I walked over and sat on the bed next to her. "I've lost you forever," she said, almost mumbling through her sobs. "What have I done? What have I done?" I put my arm around her and pulled her into me. I reached around with my left hand and gently pushed her head into my shoulder for support. With all the trauma the two of us had been through in the last several months, I had never seen her quite this distraught. I knew hearing about me with another woman would be hard for her, but I had no idea it would affect her like this. We sat in silence for a good 10 minutes until she started getting better control over herself. "I take it you talked to Bev today," I said. "Yeah," she said in almost a whisper. "She said she saw you last night with an incredibly beautiful woman, much more beautiful and younger than me. Bev said she must have been a model." Now I can't believe Bev would have said she was more beautiful than you. "Well, she didn't actually say that, but she described her to me," she said. "Honey, I have said it many times before and I will say it with my dying breath. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. You were when I first saw you, and you are today." She hugged me tighter and held on for another few minutes. "Honey, you have to pull yourself together," I told her. "The kids are very worried. Lisa called me at the studio and asked if I would come over. How about if I go downstairs and order a pizza for tonight while you freshen up? I'll stick around and we'll all have dinner together. How does that sound?" She pulled her head from my shoulder and looked at me. Never since I had known her had I ever seen Joan look so bad. She had no makeup on. Her eyes were red and puffy. Even her cute little nose was red, swollen, and runny. In fact, her whole face was puffy. "Okay," was all she said in a small, almost demure voice. She gave me a little kiss on the cheek, then, ever so slightly, curled her lips up at the ends, forcing a smile, before going into the bathroom to get cleaned up. I went back downstairs to face the kids again. "Hey kids," I announced in a cheerful tone. "How about pizza tonight?" "Yeah," yelled Linda with exuberance. Lisa was a little less enthusiastic. "Are you going to stay with us, Daddy?" I looked into her eyes and knew very well she wasn't talking about dinner. Once again, I had to ask myself if I was doing the right thing. I knew it was going to be hard on the kids, but I had no idea it would affect Joan like this. I had expected her to stay strong for the kids' sake as well. "I'm staying for dinner, honey," I said with a phony smile. You don't think I'm going to miss pizza, do you? Is Mommy coming down? Asked Linda. Yes, she is, guys. She's just getting cleaned up a little, then she'll be down to have dinner with us. So, who got a today? I asked. Both of my smart young ladies held their hand up. Wow, good job, I said. Okay, who got 2 A's today? This time only Linda raised her hand. Okay, Linda, you get to pick what you want on the pizza. I ordered the pizza, then sat down to help them with their homework. We were so engrossed with dividing fractions we didn't realize Joanne was behind us until Linda saw her. Mommy, she said, jumping down from her chair and running over to her. Lisa looked up and did the same. Joanne knelt down to give them both hugs and kisses. Are you okay? Lisa asked her. Yes, honey, I'm fine. I'm sorry I was so sad. I'm okay now. Once again, she hugged both Lisa and Linda. Joanne sat down at the table and helped Linda with her homework while I helped Lisa with hers. It felt so comfortable, the 4 of us being together. I wished it could stay like this forever. Just as we were finishing with the homework, the doorbell rang. I walked to the front door and paid the pizza guy, including a nice tip. I headed back to the kitchen and announced, "Pizza delivery." Yeah, both kids yelled as they voluntarily started setting the table. It turned out to be a fun evening. Joanne perked up some and, after dinner, the kids and I roughhoused in the living room. It was just like old times. When it was time, we both put the kids to bed. I pulled the covers up to their chins and tucked them in, then gave them each a big kiss on the forehead. I was all set to take off when Joanne asked if I could stay a few more minutes and offered to make me a vodka and tonic. She poured herself a small glass of wine and brought both drinks into the living room. We sat side by side on the couch. I'm sorry you had to come over like this, she said. I hope you didn't have to cancel any plans. No, I had no plans, I said. I'm sorry you had to find out I was seeing someone from Bev. I probably should have called you after running into her last night, but I was hoping she'd at least have the sense to wait for a while before saying something. I was going to tell you myself, in person, when I picked up the kids this weekend. Yeah, I was feeling a little down to start with today. Then when she called and told me she saw you with a young, beautiful woman, well, I just kind of went to pieces, I guess. Joanne took a sip of her wine. Bev said to her, "It looked like you two were very much in love." I know I shouldn't ask, but do you love her, Chris? You're right, Joanne. You shouldn't ask, I said. I couldn't believe Bev told her that, but I'm going to answer you anyway, just this once. No, I don't love her. She is someone who keeps me from getting too lonely. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Chris, is there any way I can make up for I did to you? If you mean is there any way I would come back, the answer is no. I'm sorry, Joanne. As much as I would love to have my family back, there's just too much hurt there. I could never do it. As far as making it up to me, just be a good mother. The girls need us both now more than they ever did. We need to give them every ounce of love and support we possibly can. I finished my drink, gave her a light kiss on the lips and left. It had been an emotionally charged night. I was hoping Laura would be waiting for me when I got home, but no such luck. I didn't get a lot of sleep that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that my whole family desperately needed me and I was letting them down. For months after walking out, and I was still going to sleep with tears in my eyes. The next day I was busy again at the studio. The following week I had a 2-day shoot coming up and I was working with Jeff, a young set designer who the ad agency sent over. As we were going over some sketches, I heard the bell in the back room letting me know someone had come in the front door. As I approached the front, I was pleasantly surprised. There, looking absolutely ravishing, was Laura. Laura, I called out to her, what a great surprise. Come on back. I motioned for her to come back to the shooting room. I thought I'd come down and see what a real studio looks like, she said as she walked in. Laura's eyes were focused on me, so she didn't see the young set designer. There were 2 other things I wanted to do as well, she said. 1. Invite you to my birthday party next week, and 2. Give you a hell of a BJ. I cleared my throat and motioned toward the, now blushing, designer. Oh, she said, I'm sorry, I didn't see you standing there. Did I embarrass you? She joked. She looked back at me. Does that mean I have to give him a BJ too? I thought the poor crimson-colored young man was cream his jeans right then and there. No, Laura, I said with a laugh. Jeff, why don't you go out for a coffee break? I said. Yes, Mr. Parker. The poor kid was so embarrassed he was out the door like he'd been shot from a cannon. Laura was giggling. You can be evil when you want to be, can't you? I said. How about tonight? Would you like to do something? No, I can't tonight. I'm going out with Kyle. I just about swallowed my Adam's apple. Kyle, my voice raising in pitch from the shock. Who is Kyle? He's kind of a on-again, off-again boyfriend, she said. She looked at me. You're not jealous, are you? You know we never said anything about dating other people. I hope it's not going to be a problem, she said. She was right. We had never talked about being exclusive with one another. I really had no right to tell her she couldn't date anyone else. No, it's not really a problem. It's just that you came out of nowhere with it. I'm sorry. I probably should have said something sooner. We just started dating again a couple of weeks ago. I see. I was still in a small state of shock. I pick up my kids tomorrow morning and I'll have them all weekend. How about Monday night? I'll have to see, she said. I'll call you during the day and let you know one way or the other, she said. Don't forget, Friday night, my place, 8 o'clock, and bring your camera. I want lots and lots of pictures, okay? Okay, I said with a smile. I'll bring my camera. Saturday morning, when I picked up the kids, Joanne looked like her old self again. She was nicely dressed and had her usual, just enough, makeup on. She was pleasant and, I don't know if I would say upbeat, but at least she wasn't depressed. Lisa, Linda, and I had a great time as usual. When I brought them home Sunday night, they told their mother all about the big Ferris wheel we went on at Navy Pier. She smiled as she listened to the kids, then looked at me and gave me a wink. I'm not sure what that meant, but it was cute. Monday, I was hoping to get a call from Laura telling me she would be over for a night of carnal pleasures, but I got nothing. Not even the call she promised me. Tuesday was the same thing. No Laura. No call. By Wednesday, I was getting a little pissed. The least she could do is call. I dialed her number, but got her voicemail. Hey, remember me? I said leaving a message, you were going to call me Monday. This is Wednesday and no calls. What's going on? Call me. About an hour later, I got her call. Hi, honey. I'm so sorry. I've been so busy getting things ready for my party. I see, I said. How is it going? Do you think you'll be able to take a break long enough to come over and screw me until my eyes bug out? I said with a chuckle in my voice. Oh, honey, I don't know. I still have so much to do. Would you forgive me if I don't make over there this week? I'll make it up to you next week, I promise. This wasn't sounding good to me. First, she springs a boyfriend on me. Now she doesn't have time to come over at all for the whole week. I was getting a bad feeling. Okay, I said rather abruptly. I'll see you Friday. I closed the phone. I had some thinking to do. Yes, we never discussed being exclusive with each other. It wasn't like I was in love with her. I wasn't. So I really had no right to even ask. For the first time, I examined the possibility of a future for Laura and me, but I didn't see one. As much fun as we have in the sack, I knew there was no long-term relationship there. I would play it out and see where it goes, but I had a feeling it was coming to an end. Friday night, I arrived right at 8 o'clock and was surprised to see so many cars there already. I took my camera, knocked, and entered. The party was already in full swing. I couldn't understand why she told me 8 o'clock if it started earlier. Laura saw me from across the room. Hey, my photographer is here, she exclaimed. She came over and gave me a kiss on the cheek. I leaned down and was going to kiss her back on the lips, but she turned her head and I got a cheek as well. She took me around and introduced me to several people as her photographer. I was getting a little pissed. Is that all I'm doing here, Laura? I asked. I thought I was invited as a guest. Oh, don't be party pooper, she said. I'm just having some fun. It's my birthday. It was her birthday, so I thought, yeah, I guess I should lighten up a little, let her have some fun. Then I was introduced to Kyle. Kyle, this is Mr. Parker. He's my professor for the class on creative photography I'm taking. He's going to take pictures tonight. Kyle extended his hand and I shook it, squeezing probably a little more than I should have. Damn, professor, he said. You've got quite a grip there. Oh, I'm sorry, Kyle. I said almost sarcastically. Did I hurt you? The drinks are over there, said Laura. Help yourself. I did just that. This is going to be a long night, I thought. I walked around taking pictures of the guests. There were the usual stupid questions to answer. What kind of camera do you use? Can I hold your models? Gee, can you really make a living taking pictures? The same stupid stuff I usually get at functions like this. I looked around to find Laura. I was getting tired of this and I was getting ready to leave. Several times I saw her with Kyle, and she had barely spoken to me since I arrived. I went into the kitchen looking for her, and found her sitting on Kyle's lap giving him a very passionate kiss. I raised my camera and took a shot of them. I don't even think they saw the flash. They were so engrossed. I turned and went through living room and into the bedroom she had as a home office. I took the flash card from the camera and laid it on the table next to her computer. She can print her own damn pictures, I thought, then left. The next day was Saturday. Laura knew I had my kids but called anyway. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't call again for the rest of the weekend, and I didn't listen to her voicemail until Monday. Hi, Chris, she said rather bashfully. You're probably pretty pissed at me, huh? I'm sorry. Please call me. I was going to see her in class later that night, so I didn't see any need to call her. I didn't really want to talk to Laura. I knew what I was going to say and I hated to say it. We had been, well, I don't know if you'd call it dating, but we had been screwing each other for about 3 months. During that time, we really had nothing more than sex between us. There was no emotional feelings, not on my part, and I was pretty sure after Friday night, not on hers either. I needed more. I needed to find a woman I could love and who would love me back. I had made up my mind I would call it off with Laura if she didn't beat me to the punch. I waited until everyone, including Laura, was seated before I entered the room. After class, Laura came up and asked if we could go for a drink. I declined. Listen, I'd like to apologize for Friday. I treated you like crap and I want to say I'm sorry, she said. Are you in love with Kyle? I asked. To tell you the truth, I don't know. Sometimes I think he's the greatest guy in the world. Then he does something stupid and don't want anything to do with him. I just don't know. Even if I was, though, that's no excuse for how I treated you. I'm so sorry. Well, you're right there. It was no excuse for the way you treated me. Right from the start, introducing me as your private photographer. I was pissed as soon as I walked in the door. I know. I'm so sorry. Come on, let me buy you a drink. Laura, I put up with Joe and treating me like crap for a long time. I did it because of the kids and the fact that she was still my wife, but I won't put up with it ever again. Can you understand that? Yes, I understand. I knew when I saw the flash card you were really pissed off. I hope I didn't hurt your feelings too much. I really do like you. Chris and I enjoyed every minute we spent together. Our date was the nicest date I've ever been on. You're such a gentleman, and you're a wonderful guy. I just don't know what I want yet. I'm sorry, Chris. I'm really sorry. I believe I saw a tear in her eye as she left. I know there were plenty in my eyes again by the time I got home. I just don't understand it, I thought. Several of my buddies, as well as some of my married female friends, all tell me I'm such a catch. Then why am I having such a hard time with women lately? Once again, I sat in my favorite chair with a vodka and tonic in my hand, staring into the darkness, wallowing in my depression and feeling sorry for myself. For 2 cents, tonight I'd go home, curl up next to my wife, put my arms around her, tell her I'm home. But then what would happen after that, I thought. And that is exactly the reason I can't do it. Tomorrow is Tuesday and I start that ad campaign. I'll be shooting for 3 days straight, so I guess I'd better get some rest, I thought. Tomorrow's another day. Joanne Parker sat aimlessly at the kitchen table. Her long, modest robe had partially come undone to reveal the unpretentious bra and panties she wore underneath. Her body completely drained of any strength, leaving not even the energy to get herself a cup of morning coffee. Her eyes were fixed on the window overlooking the backyard, but she didn't notice the crystal blue sky or the leftover droplets from last night's spring rain clinging to the green leaves. Even the ringing phone could not break through the fog that was her brain at the moment. For the first time in a month, tear once again stained her cheeks. On the table in front of her was a torn open envelope from the Cook County District Court, and next to it laid several sheets of unfolded paper. At the top of the first sheet was the heading, Termination of Marriage. This was not a surprise. It had been 6 months in the making. Still, try as she did, there was just no way to prepare herself for this moment. She was officially without her husband, and without the life she had known and loved for the last 11 years. Yes, it was official, through no one's fault but her own. She had ruined her life, her husband's life, as well as that of her children. Joanne thought back to the first time she saw him. Having a successful career in modeling, she had met hundreds of photographers, even dated a few. But Chris had something special. At the time, she couldn't put her finger on it. It wasn't self-confidence. He was confident in his abilities as a photographer. He was just somewhat shy in other areas. It wasn't his good looks. Although he was good-looking, she had known thousands of good-looking men. It wasn't until their first date that she realized what it was about Chris that set him apart. It was his passion. Passion for his work, passion for life, passion for always trying to do the right thing whether it was the popular thing or not. And the passion he already had for her. When they met, Joanne was in the midst of a successful modeling career. Her face was immediately recognized among the jet-set crowd, but even the woman ahead of her in the checkout at the supermarket would stare and say, "I know you. You're the girl from the magazine." Yes, Joanne was at least mildly famous, and yet, when she took his arm and walked beside Chris, it was she that puffed out her chest with pride and thought, "Look, everyone, look who I'm with." Later that morning, Chris was in the back room of his studio paying bills for another month of being in business for himself, when he heard the buzzer ring indicating someone had entered the waiting room. He leaned back in his chair and craned his neck back to see who had walked in. Beverly Hall was standing in the doorway. She was not his favorite person. Now what the heck does she want? He thought. Bev. he yelled with a motion of his hand. She looked in the direction of his voice. Back here, he said. Be careful of all the cords and stuff. Bev carefully maneuvered her through the maze of light stands, cameras, and cords that made up the studio's shooting room and approached Chris in the rear office. As she got closer, Chris could see she was upset. Her eyes looked as if she had been crying, and her hands were shaking. This was not the Bev he knew. This was not the sarcastic bitch who told Joanne about his date with Laura. This was someone he had never seen before. You have to stop this, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. You have to stop. You have to go back to her, Chris. You have to. Bev, what's the matter? Is something wrong with Joanne? I've never seen you like this before. Chris's voice now showing concern instead of indifference. She got the divorce papers today. She was supposed to go shopping with me today, but when I got to the house she was just sitting there, staring at the walls, almost catatonic. I wondered, said Chris. I've been trying to call her all morning. I knew those papers were coming. I got mine today too. I wanted to warn her so it wouldn't be so much of a shock, but she never picked up the phone. Chris, I don't think she would have understood a word you said if she had picked it up. I never saw her like this. Well, is she all right? Chris was getting worried. I don't know, Chris. I walked her up to bed and asked your neighbor if she would stay there for a while. Chris immediately picked up his cell phone and dialed his house phone. Hello, Mrs. Walker, this is Chris. Hello, Mr. Parker, are you coming home? Mrs. Walker, I can't really leave the studio right now. How is she? Well, she stopped crying. I think she is asleep. Mrs. Walker, can you do me a favor, please? Just peek in on her and make sure she's okay for me. But do it quietly if she is asleep. I don't want to wake her. Yes, Mr. Parker, just a minute. The elderly Mrs. Walker took each step slowly as she climbed the stairs and looked into the master bedroom. There she saw Joanne, in somewhat of a fitful sleep, still breathing erratically from a morning of crying. Mrs. Walker descended the stairs so she wouldn't disturb Joanne before assuring Mr. Parker that she was sleeping. Chris thanked her and asked if she could still stay there in case she woke up. To Chris's relief, the kind neighbor promised she would stay. Chris told Bev that Joanne was sleeping. Have a seat, Bev, he said in a kinder tone. Can I get you some coffee? Bev sat down and accepted his offer. Chris, please, I have known Joanne almost all our lives. She loves you. You have to go back to her. Tell me how, Bev. Chris started. Tell me how to trust her again, and I'll go back with wings on my feet. There was a time when I would never have questioned her fidelity. I trusted her implicitly, but that trust was betrayed, Bev. She ripped my heart out. Even if I could get over the hurt, tell me how to get back that trust? If you can do that, I'll go back tonight. Chris's hand was starting to shake now as his emotions climbed from being forced to talk about it again. Tell me, Bev. Tell me how I could come to work and not wonder where she is or who she's with. Tell me how I keep from being suspicious every time she leaves the house to go shopping or to go have lunch with you or one of her other friends. Please tell me. Tell me and I'm back. Chris, she hasn't seen anyone since you walked out. I know her. She would never do this again. Bev's voice was also weak as she pleaded for her friend. Chris noticed her coffee cup was almost empty and took it for a refill. Bev, you may be right, but how would I ever know for sure? Joanne couldn't live like that either. Can you imagine being under constant suspicion? How would you feel if every time you left the house you knew Jim would be wondering if you were cheating on him? If every time you came home, even if he didn't ask you, you could tell he was wondering where you've been, who were you with? And then see doubt in his eyes when you tried to reassure him he had nothing to worry about. Chris handed her a full cup of brew and filled his own cup again. I know I couldn't live under constant scrutiny like that. I'm sure Joanne would be understanding at first, but for how long? How long would it take me before I started trusting her again? Would it be before or after she started to resent my suspicions? How long before she started to resent me for still having them? Bev was starting to understand. It wasn't his ego or his anger that was keeping Chris from going back home. He had thought it out completely and from every angle. She could see he looked for a way back, but couldn't find it. Bev, Chris said, don't you think I want to go back? Hell, I'd give up everything I own if I could go back in time and have everything as it was. By God, I've stayed awake nights trying to come up with a way to go back and make it work. Some kind of a plan, therapy, something, but I've come up empty. Every time, absolutely empty. It all boils down to one thing, trust. When I think back to that night I caught her, I just think of her looking straight in my face and lying to me. I can't forget that, Bev. As much as I love her, I don't think I could ever really trust her again. Not completely. Now Bev saw the tears welling up in Chris's eyes. Before, she thought Chris was just being a hard ass. But now she saw this was killing him as much as it was Joanne. He just had more strength to deal with it than she did. That's all. Bev, you've got to help her, said Chris. You're her best friend, and she needs you. Please, no more running to her telling her all about some girl you've seen me with. Bev hung her head low. I know. I shouldn't have done that. I was so sorry after I saw how it affected her. I've been pissed at her too. I knew about Kevin and, to this day, I don't know why. She didn't even seem to like him. I didn't even know about the guy from the bank. So when I found out she cheated on you again, well, I just got pissed, and when I saw you with that pretty girl, I guess I just felt she deserved it. She needs to start getting on with her life, Bev. She needs to find someone who will make her happy, said Chris, wiping a tear from his eye. I don't think there's much chance of that, said Bev. She told me the other day, if she couldn't have you, she didn't want any man. That's just silly, Bev, Chris said with a scowl on his face. She needs someone to love and who will love her. She can't punish herself forever. I don't want that. Well, there was another reason she said she shouldn't date as well. She said she would never bring another man home in front of Lisa and Linda. I think she means it, Chris. I know her and I don't see her dating, at least not for a long, long time. I have a client coming in soon. When I'm done, I'll close up and go to see her. I'll talk to her. Beverly thought for a minute. Chris, I don't think that's a good idea. I wanted to come and talk to you in person. I really thought I could persuade you to go back to her. I see now I was wrong. I'm going back. I'll take care of her for a while. I'm going to stop by my place and pack some clothes and stay with her and the kids for a while. But she's got to learn to face this, to stand on her own 2 feet. If you go there again, she'll just keep leaning on you and hoping you'll come back to her. No, let me do it. Okay, Bev, if you think that's best. Chris was doing everything he could again to hold back his tears. I do still love her, you know. That will never change. I'll love her until I die. I just can't go back. If I did, I think there is a chance we would learn to resent each other. That wouldn't be good for her, me, or the kids. I know, Chris, I know. I'm glad I came over. I see everything from a different perspective now. Damn, someone should make a movie about you too and show the unbelievable hurt an affair can cause. I guarantee it would make people think twice before stepping out on their spouse. As Bev left, Chris had a completely different opinion of her than when she walked into the studio just an hour ago. He always thought he was a pretty good judge of character, but he sure misjudged her. Jim, her husband, was always such a nice guy. He wondered what he ever saw in Bev. Now he knew. Bev did go back and stay with Joanne for over 2 weeks. She worked hard to convince Joe and that she needed to start getting her life back in order. Finally, Joanne started to take care of herself again. At least she was getting dressed in the mornings and not walking around in her robe. She was wearing makeup again and looking ravishing. Bev convinced her it was time to start looking for a full-time job. On the QT, Chris was calling Bev on her cell phone and getting updates on her progress. He started to feel a little better himself. He certainly took no pleasure in watching Joanne suffer. She was the mother of his children, and it didn't do them any good to watch their mother agonizing every day either. A couple months had passed with not much happening. Chris, of course, was still picking the kids up every Friday night and dropping them off Sunday evenings. Joanne was always very pleasant when she saw him and seemed to finally start to accept the situation. She had just landed a full-time job at another bank as a teller. That was good news to Chris. He felt it would help her sense of independence and, hopefully, start to rebuild the pride in herself that she had completely lost. Bev was being a true friend, helping her get her life back on track and being there at the drop of hat if needed. The girls also seemed to be happier. Over the weekend, they told Chris they heard their mom laugh the other day, for the first time since this all began. An unrelenting spring was finally giving way to summer. The cool temperatures were on the rise, and it hadn't rained now in over a week. Life was finally starting to move forward again. Chris sat in the studio. It had been an uncharacteristically slow day. What the hell, he thought. I don't usually get a chance to go home early. If I leave now, I can beat rush hour traffic. Just as Chris was closing up, his business phone rang. He certainly didn't want to blow off any work, so he rushed back in and grabbed the receiver. Hello, this is Chris Parker, he answered. Mr. Parker, my name is Charles Naughton, came the voice from the other end. I'm in charge of promotions for the Georgia Rhythm section, he said. I'm sure you've heard of them. The Georgia Rhythm section was a nationally known rock band with several records to their credit. Of course I've heard of them. Who hasn't? Said Chris. How can I help you, Mr. Naughton? In a couple of months, they're doing a concert at the Red Rose Horizon. RDA Records is going to record it for a live album. We need someone to shoot the concert. One shot would be used for the album cover and several more would be used for the album's insert. Of course, you would also be given full credit for photography in the insert. Would you be interested? This was not the normal kind of photography Chris did. Not that he couldn't do it, but he would have to rent a lot of the equipment needed. It would also entail an awful lot of preparation time. Still, he thought about his kids. What a thrill it would be for them to be able to take the album to school and show all their friends their dad's name. Yeah, Mr. Naughton, if we can come to terms financially, I would be interested. Mr. Naughton had already a very lucrative arrangement in mind. Chris did some figuring and, even with renting the equipment he needed, it would be well worth the effort. Chris spent the rest of the day putting together a tentative list of equipment he would need. By the time he had things worked out, it was the end of the day. For the second time that day, Chris turned to lock the front door to his studio when he heard a female voice behind him. "Are you leaving already?" Chris turned and saw her. Although she was pretty, she didn't look like a model. Her short, black, spiked hair seemed a strange contrast to the expensive woman's business suit she was wearing. She stretched out her hand with a smile. "Hi, I'm Barbara," she said in a businesslike manner. "Are you the photographer?" Chris took her hand and shook it. Yeah," he said. "I'm Chris Parker. Can I help you?" "Well, I was hoping to talk to you about some advertising photos I'd like to have taken, but it looks like I'm too late. Are you closed?" "To tell you the truth, I was on my way to get a drink at Plato's. It's right around the corner. Maybe you'd like to join me and we could talk there." Chris liked what he saw and hoped she would take him up on his offer. If not, then he would invite her back into the studio. He wasn't about to turn down a job. "Yes," she said with a smile. "I'd like that." Chris and Barbara walked the 3 blocks to Plato's, sat, and talked over a couple drinks. Barbara explained she was a day trader in the stock market and wanted to have a presentation portfolio done. It had to be elegant in its design and very sophisticated, something that would present her with dignity and class. Chris couldn't help but think they were 2 words that described the woman herself. In fact, this woman exuded the epitome of those 2 words. As they talked, the conversation started to drift from the portfolios to more personal things. At one point, Chris thought about asking her out but backed off. He couldn't help but think this woman was way out of his league. He had no idea how much money a day trader made, but he was willing to bet it was more than he made. Chris always thought of himself as just a regular, average guy. This woman was more like royalty, he thought. Just as Chris had decided a personal relationship with her was probably not going to happen, she surprises him. "Chris, I really have to get going," she said, "but I've had a real nice time. Thank you for the drinks. I've had kind of a hard day, and it was just what I needed." She reached over and put her hand on top of Chris's. "How about you let me reciprocate?" she said, looking him in the eyes. "Why don't you come to my place some night this week for dinner? I have a housekeeper who doubles as my cook. She makes the most delicious lasagna you've ever had. Would you be free Wednesday night?" she asked. Chris loved lasagna, but even if he hated it, he was not about to turn down an offer like this. Barbara wrote directions to her house on a napkin, then left. As he finished his drink, Chris had to laugh to himself. Today he landed 2 jobs in date. Not bad for a slow day. Chris was in a great mood as he cruised along the Edens en route to Barbara's. He had no idea what to expect, but it certainly wasn't the sight of the tall, iron gate that gave way to her property. "Holy cow," he thought. "I guess she does make more than I do." He pulled up and rang the buzzer at the entrance. In just a moment, the massive structure mystically opened, as if he had spoken the magic words. As Chris drove up the winding drive, a large brick structure with tall columns loomed ahead. "Damn," he thought, "this place is a mansion. She is way out of my league." As he pulled up, he saw Barbara standing in the doorway. He had only seen her dressed in her business attire. Now she stood there in a black slinky dress that hugged every curve with a slit up the side that revealed a long, shapely leg. Even her spiked hair seemed to fit the occasion. Chris was in awe as he was given the grand tour. There were fireplaces in almost every room. With each guided step, he felt more and more intimidated. He had already given up any hope of having a relationship with Barbara. He felt he had absolutely nothing to offer her. They had dinner in the formal dining room, and it was everything Barbara promised it would be. After dinner, Barbara dismissed her cook and told her she wouldn't need her anymore for the evening. She looked at him. "Do you like wine, Chris?" she asked in a sultry voice. "I'm not really what you would call a wine connoisseur, but yeah, I like most wines." "Well, if you walk through the kitchen there, then make a left, you'll find the wine pantry. Why don't you pick out something you like and bring a couple glasses out to the living room?" Chris found a wine he liked, found the opener in a drawer in the kitchen and 2 expensive crystal wine glasses. He opens the wine and allowed it to breathe for a short time, then walked into the living room carrying the 2 glasses and the open bottle of wine. He stopped briefly to take in the view. Barbara sat kitty-corner on the couch with one leg stretched out, separating the slit in her dress and exposing a silky thigh almost to her hip. Chris thought he had better sit down quickly before getting embarrassed at the tint rapidly forming in his trousers. He poured the wine and handed Barbara her glass. She looked at him with a small grin as she took a sip. Suddenly it was as if she had just made up her mind. She stood up and reached out her hand for Chris's. She led him around the corner and straight into her bedroom. It was just what he expected, tall ceilings and a large, four-posted bed. Then they had wild sex. They laid there in each other's arms, not saying a word. After a while, Barbara got up and went into the master bath. Barbara walked into a large closet and returned with 2 huge pillows, placing them under his head. "What time do you have to get up tomorrow?" she inquired. Chris thought. He was about 45 minutes further north than his own place. It took him an hour during rush hour. "About 6:30, he said. Barbara picked up the phone and dialed 2 numbers. "Janet, would you give us a 6:30 wake-up call, please?" she asked. "Is that the cook?" Chris was a little surprised she would announce that I was staying over to her staff, especially since this was their first date. "Yeah, she is up every day at 6 in the morning. I've told her several times she doesn't have to get up that early, but I guess it's natural for her, so she may as well be our alarm clock since she's up anyway." Chris was exhausted and fell asleep almost immediately with his arm around Barbara. This next thing he knew, the phone was ringing and it was daylight. On his drive into the studio, Chris could hardly think of anything but the evening he had just spent with Barbara. It was so strange. Her appearance and businesslike attitude had given him the impression she would be a cold fish in the sack, if he could even get her there, but she was anything but a cold fish. Damn, he thought. He forgot to ask her about the king-size container of Ultra Glide. Once in the studio, Chris called Barbara and thanked her for a wonderful dinner and fantastic evening. He heard the smile in her voice as she told him how much she also enjoyed it. Chris told her he would invite her to his place, but he was afraid she would laugh at his lifestyle. She told him that would never happen, but since she had all the amenities, he should come to her place again. "I'll tell you what," she said, trying to make him feel a little more at ease. "There is a wonderful pizza place in town. Why don't you pick up a pizza and come over next Wednesday?" Chris jumped at the offer. The rest of the day, you couldn't remove the grin from Chris's face, no matter what you did. The weekend was even more exciting. Joanne told him to come over early on Friday because she had made his favorite casserole, and she was hoping he would stay for dinner. Wow, he thought to himself, 2 home-cooked meals in 1 week, mind-blowing sex with an exciting new woman, and wait until the kids hear about his upcoming job. Chris sat in the living room with a cup of after-dinner coffee. The kids came down the stairs with their stuff for the weekend. Chris had found it hard to hold back during dinner, but wanted to wait until the right moment before announcing the news. Now seemed like the right time. "Kids, I have a little surprise," he said, being able to hardly contain himself. "Next month, on the 27th, that's a Friday, we're all going out. Joe, and that means you too." Joanne's expression perked up a little. "I have just accepted a job to shoot the album cover for the Georgia Rhythm section." The girls started to scream already. "Hold on a minute," he said. "You haven't even heard the best part yet. We're all going to their concert at the Horizon, and I have been given complete access to backstage before and after the concert, so you guys are going to have a chance to meet them." The girls were stunned. He was afraid they had gone into shock. Even Joanne was just staring at him. "Joe, and I need you there to watch them for me. I'll be busy as hell most of the time and won't have a chance to be with you guys during the concert, but I'll be around before and after to make sure you guys get backstage to meet the band." It was like the house had been invaded by a bunch of wild Indians. Even Joanne was excited. It set the tone for the whole weekend. They laughed and joked around the whole time. Both Lisa and Linda were like their old selves again, happy and carefree. For Chris, it was what he lived for. Wednesday night, Chris stopped off for pizza and was about to pull up to that big iron gate again, wondering if Barbara had any more surprises in store for him. Well, of course she did. He really was starting to like this woman. They sat and talked for over an hour. Chris found out she was a professional violinist, had several master's degrees in various subjects, and did all the interior designing for her place. She was a woman of many talents. After dinner, she asked Chris if he would like to relax in the sauna. She had a workout room in the back of the house with sauna as well as a jacuzzi. They stripped off their clothes and spent the next 20 minutes talking in the sauna. Man, he thought, he really could get used to this lifestyle. Chris was actually starting to feel a little more comfortable. He wondered if his ego would allow him a serious relationship with a woman that made so much more money than he did. Well, he wasn't going to worry about it now. They were a long way away from a serious relationship, so for right now, he was just going to enjoy himself. Chris hadn't seen the maid, so he wasn't too worried as he followed Barbara through the house naked as jaybirds. They made their way to the bedroom. For the next couple of weeks, Chris's elation was tempered by doubts. He was now spending almost every night with Barbara and growing more and more in love with her by the day. He just didn't know if he could handle being rich. Would he like her friends? Would she like his? Their worlds were so far apart. Could his ego handle not being the breadwinner? It would be different, he thought, if she just made a little bit more than he did. But in her world, his income was totally insignificant. Then there was Joanne. He had not told her or the kids about his ongoing relationship yet. How would they handle it? Everything was going so good right now, he didn't want to ruin it. To his dying day, Chris will never forget the jubilation he saw in his daughter's faces as he took them and Joanne backstage to meet each member of the Georgia Rhythm section. Both Lisa and Linda were treated like royalty by each band member. They all signed the girls' programs and included a special little notation. They posed for pictures. The drummer even flirted some with Joanne. Chris had been a professional photographer for more than 20 years. He loved what he did, but never had his profession given him more pleasure than it did at that moment as he looked into the eyes of his daughters. He was their hero, and he hoped he would always stay that way. A couple weeks later, most of the excitement died down. Chris printed up several of the pictures he took backstage, blew them up poster size, and framed them for the girls' rooms, at the house as well as his place. His relationship with Barbara was still going strong and building with intensity by the day. For the first time since meeting her, he was actually visualizing a life together. He had not mentioned his relationship to either Joanne or the girls. Everything was going so well, he just didn't want to take a chance. He had to, though. He was planning on asking Barbara to marry him. He couldn't keep it a secret any longer. Chris called Beverly. If anyone had inkling on how to spring the news with the least amount of pain, it was her. They had a long talk. Bev told him it would definitely be a shock and it would be difficult, but she assured him Joanne was strong enough to take the news. At the end of the conversation, she congratulated Chris and wished him a happy life with Barbara. Barbara and Chris had never been together on the weekends because of Chris's commitment to his kids. Barbara understood and never pushed to invade Chris's time with them. Chris's plan was to tell Joanne and the kids this Friday night, then take the kids to meet Barbara. When he explained his plan to Barbara, she was less than enthusiastic. "Chris, I just don't know if that's a good idea," she said. "Being told you have a girlfriend will be hard enough on them, but if you bring them here, it might really overwhelm them." Chris was a little taken aback. She had known about his ex-wife and his daughters from the start. Now she was acting like she didn't want to meet them. "Do you have a problem with my daughters?" he asked. "Oh, Chris, she said with an apologetic voice. "No, of course not. Please don't even think that way. I just think it would be better if they met me on neutral ground. I want them to like me, that's all." Chris felt a little better. "Well, we could meet you at a restaurant or something, I guess." "Listen," she said, "how about this? I still have not seen your place. In all the months we've dated, you have never invited me to your condo. Could you get the girls over there sometime during the week next week? I really think you should spend your weekend alone with them. I don't want to encroach on your quality time with them. Let's arrange something early evening for one night next week at your place." Chris thought about what she said. Maybe it would be better to meet at his place. He agreed. Now he had to gather up all the courage he could and tell Joanne and the girls of the new woman in his life. For the first time, Friday evening came too soon. He was nervous as Joanne invited him in. She greeted him with a kiss on the cheek like always. "Where are the girls?" he asked. "They're still upstairs getting ready," she said. "Would you like a cup of coffee while you're waiting?" "Yeah," he said, "that would be great. I've got something to tell you anyway. Maybe it would be better if I told you alone." They walked into the kitchen where Chris took a seat at the table. "Joanne, I already know," said Joanne. "Bev stopped in earlier. I was going to let you sweat it out and tell me yourself, but I couldn't put you through that." A tidal wave of relief washed over Chris. Good old Bev, he thought. I owe her. "And you're okay with it?" he asked Joanne. "I don't have much choice, do I? Bev and I have had many conversations about you and me. She made me look at the situation from your point of view, and I understand. I also better understand what I did to you. I not only hurt you then, but your hurt, as mine, goes on and on and on. I wish you only happiness, my love." "Thank you, Joanne," he said with sadness in his voice. "I would give anything if we could go back, but we just can't." "I know, my darling," she said with an even greater amount of sorrow in her voice. "I know. Joanne, what about you? Is there anyone in your life?" "No, not at all. My life has changed. I've committed myself to being a single mother and to care of our girls as well as I can. I have no interest in men. In the first place, when I do look at a man, I immediately compare him to you. Funny thing, they just never measure up. I just can't help it." Just then the girls came down with their overnight bags. Linda jumped on his lap, and Lisa hugged and kissed him. Chris thought it might be better if he waited until he was alone with them before telling them about Barbara. Chris waited until Saturday morning. He took them to breakfast at their favorite restaurant and explained the situation to them. "I hope you can understand," he told them. This doesn't mean I don't still love your mother. I do and I always will, but we just can't live together anymore. Barbara and I are in love. We make each other happy, and I want to ask her to marry me. That doesn't mean she is going to take the place of your mother. No one could ever do that. Chris looked at his two lovely daughters. Both girls had teared their eyes. Why did everything always have to be so damn hard? He thought. Chris went on to explain that Barbara was not taking him from them. He would always be their father and always be a part of their life. The more Chris talked, the more the girls seemed to be accepting the situation. By the time they left the restaurant, Chris was feeling a little easier. Now I just pray they like her and she likes them, he thought. All day Wednesday, Chris was on pins and needles. He had it cleared with Joanne. He would pick up the girls at 7 to meet Barbara and would have them back home by 9. Barbara was already sitting in Chris's condo when he left to go pick them up. Chris, as well as the girls, was pleasantly surprised when they returned and saw Barbara holding 2 brightly wrapped packages. Now, ladies, she said with a big smile, I know you're probably going to think I'm trying to bribe you to like me, but, well, you're right, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Open them up and see if I've succeeded. The girls ripped into their gifts. Chris had talked so much about his daughters. Barbara already felt she knew them. Linda shrieked when she saw the beautiful doll, and Lisa was just as ecstatic with her Disney classic movie collection. That cleared the way for a wonderful visit. Barbara was wonderful. She got the girls to talk about school, their favorite things to do, and even got Lisa to admit to having a boyfriend at school, something Chris knew nothing about. By the time he took Lisa and Linda back home, they were old pals with Barbara. They showed their mother what Barbara had bought for them before running upstairs to get ready for bed. Chris stayed behind for a while to assure Joe and that Barbara would never try to take the girls from her. Barbara would never try to replace her as their mother or compete for their attentions in any way. Just like old times, Chris joined Joanne and tucked the girls in bed. He kissed them both on the forehead and, with a small tear in his eye, said his goodnights. Everything seemed to be going even better than he had expected. The more Chris thought about it, the more he felt he was ready to ask Barbara to marry him. God. After the way his last marriage broke up, jumping in again was really scary. They had been dating all summer long and had grown to love one another. He thought, that's all that counts. Chris also had a pretty good summer financially. It allowed him to splurge on an engagement ring. This coming weekend was Labor Day. There was a fireworks display in town that night. Joanne and the kids were going and asked Chris if he'd like to join them, but Barbara was having a big party, so he had to decline. He couldn't miss this party. He had it all planned out. He envisioned them both slipping into bed exhausted from the day. He would have the ring hidden under his pillow. It would be perfect. He called Barbara and told her he would be there early Saturday to help her with all the preparations for the party. He was surprised when she was insistent that he not show up until the party started at 4 o'clock. She said her and her staff had everything all set, and he would only get in the way. Again, he offered his assistance, but his offer was rebuked. Finally, he relented, saying he would be there at 4. Chris was extremely surprised when he hit the code for the gate and saw all the cars there already. He had expected to be one of the first arrivals, but to him, it looked like the party had been going on for hours. Chris started introducing himself to Barbara's friends as soon as he walked in the house. He looked around for Barbara and saw her in the backyard. As soon as she saw him, she ran to him with arms stretched out and hugged him. "Let me introduce you to everyone," she said with an enthusiastic smile. Chris was still a little confused as to why everyone was there so early, but both Barbara and Chris were too busy being hosts for him to worry about it. The day was going well. Most of Barbara's friends seemed to like Chris and vice versa. As early evening approached, Chris was designated the official cook and started grilling up a batch of hamburgers and brats. Feeling a nature call coming, Chris handed over temporary duty to one of the guests and made his way to washroom. He tried the door, but it was locked, so he went to the other washroom, which was also occupied. Chris was sure the master bathroom would be free, so he headed toward the bedroom. As he approached, he heard voices. He recognized the one as Barbara. She was talking to one of her girlfriends. He was just about to enter the doorway when he heard the other woman say, "So, have you made up your mind yet? You lucky girl. Most of us would die for either one of them. You have them both eating out of your hand." Then he heard Barbara. "Yeah, I know. Kyle is a little bigger, but Chris is actually the better lover." They both giggled. "How did you ever keep the two of them from meeting all this time?" inquired the friend. "It wasn't as hard as you would think. Chris has his kids on the weekends, so I just told Kyle I was too busy to see him during the week and could only see him on the weekends. It worked out great," Barbara said with a small laugh. Chris could not believe what he was hearing. It all became clear. The reason she didn't want him to come by on the weekend is because that's when she and this Kyle were together. He was probably here earlier. That's why she didn't want him here too soon. She figured out some way to get Kyle out of here before he came. Chris didn't know how much more he could take. He did know one thing. It would be a long time before he gave his heart to another woman. He heard the girls again. "So come on," said Barbara's girlfriend. "Have you made up your mind yet? Which one gets the grand prize?" The expression on the girls' faces were that of pure shock as Chris entered the room. "I can save you the trouble of choosing," he said, then turned and walked out of the room. Chris heard Barbara yelling at him as he drove out of the big iron gates for the last time. "Daddy, Daddy," yelled Lisa and Linda. Joan looked up and was surprised to see Chris standing there. As the sky lit up with the colorful show Joe, and could tell from his posture something was wrong, Chris squeezed in between his two lovely daughters to cuddle on the blanket they had spread on the ground. He put his arms around them both. Joan reached over and held his hand as they all watched the explosive display announcing the end of summer. When Chris got home that night, there was a message on his answering machine. "You never hung around for the answer, Chris. My answer is you. Please call me." He never did. I picked it up on the second ring. "This is Chris Parker. Can I help you?" "Hi, Chris," came the concerned voice from the other end. "How are you?" "Hi, Bev. I'm okay, I guess. At least I think I am. One thing I've learned, though, whenever I hear that anxious tone in your voice, I'm never as good as I think I am." "What's the matter, Bev?" There was a short silence from the other end. "Chris, you're getting to know me way too well," she said with a small chuckle. "Bev, you've been the best friend a person could ever have. You've been able to keep both Joanne and me informed of the other's needs. You've been there for both of us when we needed you, and you've done it without alienating either of us. That takes a special talent and a true friend." "Thank you, Chris. That's very nice of you to say. I love you both. You know that. If there was only a way." I knew where she was going. She did love us both and wished there was some way she could get Joan and me back together. "Bev," I interrupted her. "I know what you're going to say. It would never work. You know that." "I know, Chris. Anyway, that's not why I'm calling you." While I was at the house yesterday, Joanne and the girls were having a conversation. Lisa and Linda wanted Joe and to ask you something, but Joanne said they would have to ask you themselves. "Ask me what, Bev?" "The girls know they can ask me anything. Anything at all." "Well," her voice sounding sadder now than when she first called. "The reason Joanne is forcing the girls to ask you is because she is hoping they'll chicken out. She knows their question is going to break your heart." Now it was my turn to be silent. I knew what the question was. The girls were getting so big. Lisa was now 14 and Linda was 11. Lisa was growing into a beautiful young woman and Linda was taking a real interest in music. Except for a couple of times, they had spent every weekend with me, but I knew it was just a matter of time before they wanted to spend their weekends pursuing their own interests. I feared that time was here. They don't want to spend the weekends with me anymore, do they? Chris, it isn't they don't want to spend any weekends with you anymore, just not every one of them, maybe once a month or so. Okay. I just didn't have any more words to say. "Chris, I'm sorry. I know how much those weekends mean to you, but they are growing up." "Yeah, I know, Bev." Tears were forming in my eyes. "Chris, maybe this will give you a little more time to date. You really need to get out there again. I know you've had your troubles in that regard, but believe it or not, Chris, there are good women out there." "Yeah, Bev, but you're taken," I said jokingly. It had been a little over 3 years since my last heartbreak. Barbara's betrayal had me questioning my future with any woman. Weekends with my daughters had been a great distraction from a lot of lonely weeknights. It was also a great excuse as to why I wasn't dating anyone. Truth was, I was scared to death. "Chris," Bev's voice broke me out of my thoughts. "The girls are literally anguishing over this. It would be nice if you could stop by the house tonight on your way home and let them off the hook." "Yeah, absolutely," I said. "Chris, I am sorry. I know how much this hurts. I can hear it in your voice. Please take the opportunity to find someone, or at least do some dating. Jim was threatening, the other day, to send a hooker over to you, just so you could get laid." Bev was doing her best to cheer me up a little. "Maybe you're right, I don't know. We'll see. I will stop at the house tonight and talk to the girls." "Okay, thanks, Chris. Please, hang in there. You're a great guy. I know she's out there, Chris." Later that day, I headed for my former house. The car guided through the suburban streets like it remembered the way. I pulled into the drive, sat in my car, and just sighed to myself. One by one, it seemed like parts of my old life were being chipped away. The problem was, I had nothing new in my life to fill in those empty spots. Maybe Bev was right, I thought. I do need to find someone. I knew she was right. There were plenty of great women out there. All I had to do was find one. Joanne heard me in the drive and was already opening the door for me as I walked in. I knew immediately she had talked to Bev. She stood in front of me, looked up and rubbed my chest with her hand. This was a familiar gesture. When we were married, she did it whenever she knew I had a difficult decision to make. You could almost read the words in her eyes. I know how hard this is for you. The words were never spoken. The look in her face said it all. I forced a grin and nodded my head. That was my own unspoken message that I was okay. Listen, she said, I bought an extra steak for tonight. How about staying for dinner? Thanks, I'd like that, I answered. The girls must have heard my voice and came walking down the stairs a little sheepishly. I couldn't help but to admire their courage. I knew they didn't want to tell me. They knew how much I treasured my time with them, and what they were about to ask me was going to hurt. They could have stalled or stayed upstairs, but they came down to face what they had to do. As much as I was aching inside, I was also very proud of my two young ladies. I could tell Joanne was proud as well. She looked at them, then back at me. She patted my chest a couple of times. I knew her idiosyncrasies so well. I knew the double pat meant she was going to leave me alone with Lisa and Linda, and that's just what she did. She turned and headed for the kitchen. The girls came over and both hugged me at the same time. Daddy, Lisa, being the oldest, started the talking. Can we talk to you a minute? I wasn't about to torture them any longer. Who knew how long they had been wrestling with the problem of telling me? I spoke up right away. Ladies, I said, trying to keep my voice upbeat, I already know what you want to say. The girls looked shocked, but I think a bit relieved as well. Come on over to the couch so we can talk, I said. Linda took my hand, and we all sat down. Girls, of course, you can spend the weekends doing what you want to do. I'm a little surprised that you didn't think you could ask me, though. Lisa was sitting on the arm of the couch with her arms wrapped around my neck. She reached over and kissed me on the cheek. Well, we were afraid we'd hurt your feelings, Dad. Ladies, as much as I wish I could keep you as little girls, I can't. You're growing up. You both have interests, things you want to do on your own. I understand that. Please, don't ever worry about asking or telling me anything ever again. Both girls hugged me around the neck, almost pulling me in two different directions at once. Just then I felt a hand on shoulder. Joanne leaned down from behind the couch and spoke softly into my ear. I have coffee made. Or would you rather have a vodka and tonic about now? She said with a smile. She must have talked to Bev right after our conversation. We never kept liquor in the house. I knew, between the vodka and the extra steak, she made a special trip to the store just for me. I almost felt guilty not taking the drink, but I didn't like to drink in front of the kids. Not that I was trying to hide anything from them, but I felt it was always better to lead by example. Just the coffee for right now, I said. Thanks. It turned out to be a nice evening. After dinner, I helped the kids with their homework. There was still a little time left before bed, so we all sat around and watched some TV. After we both put the girls to bed, Joanne told me I could come over any time during the week and spend time with them. On the way out, she gave me the unopened liquor bottles. Here, she said with a kiss on the cheek. I know you're going to want this later. I had to admit, Joanne was a great ex-wife. That evening I sat in the silence of my own home and was now sipping a vodka and tonic. All my life, I always tried to maintain an upbeat attitude, never letting anything get me down for too long. I was always joking around and trying to make people laugh. There were times, though, when I just couldn't help being a little melancholy. This was one of those times. I was remembering the good times with Joanne. Hell, they weren't good, they were great. For so many years we were so much in love, so happy together. I just couldn't figure out how we lost that. There was a time when I just couldn't wait to get home to her loving arms. Just the touch of those soft lips on mine when I walked in the door made me the happiest man on earth. I would give anything to recapture that feeling. I just didn't think it was possible anymore. Not with Joanne, and maybe not with anyone. Joanne and I were both different people since the divorce. She was still living a life of celibacy that I didn't understand at all. I had never asked that of her, and it pissed me off when I thought about it. If it wasn't for her infidelity, we'd still be together. It's like closing the barn door after the horses have escaped. I didn't know if she was doing it to show me she could be loyal, or if she had given up sex altogether. She told me once that men didn't interest her anymore, that she was going to devote her life to our kids. That's admirable, of course, but it also made me question what life with her would be like again. We didn't make love at all for the last 2 years of our marriage. On numerous occasions I tried talking to her, but she was always so ambivalent. She would tell me it was a phase she was going through, that she would eventually snap out of it. One time she said it had something to do with her stepfather, but couldn't explain it. I put up with it for several reasons. One was the kids. They were unaware of the problems. In their eyes, we were still a happy family, and I wanted to stay together as long as I could for their sake. Another reason was my own hope, as foolish as it was. It was so hard to give up something that was so good at one time. You think to yourself, if you wait long enough, maybe things will return to the way they were. Then of course there was denial. For months before the end, I had my suspicions of infidelity, strong suspicions, especially after her comment about Kevin's wife, Samantha, at the Christmas party, but there was nothing concrete. Not until the night I caught her. There is no way I could go through all that again. No, I have to accept the fact that that part of my life is over and I must move on. Somewhere there must be a woman with whom I can recapture those feelings of love and trust. Bev is a pretty smart lady. I think I'll take her advice and use my newfound weekends to get back in the ball game. It's just so damn scary. The next day, I was still a little bummed out about my weekends with the kids. We had decided this week I would pick them up Sunday morning and drop them off later that night. That gave me Friday night, all day Saturday and Saturday night to do something. My mind was still in a fog when I walked into the studio and saw I already had a message waiting for me on my phone. I hit the play button as I took my coat off and hung it up. Mr. Parker, my name is Peter Hoover. I'm an editor at Pendleton and Brainerd Publishers in New York. I'd like to talk to you about your book proposal. The message went on with some contact information, then ended. I was stunned. It's been almost a year since I sent all that stuff in. I had been trying to interest a publisher in producing a book of my work. I sent samples of a variety of stuff, but no one was interested, or so I thought anyway. I got rejection letters from most, and nothing at all from the rest. Could this company really be calling about it now, after all this time? Well, only one way to find out, I thought. I dialed the number and got Mr. Hoover on the other end of the line. Mr. Parker, thank you for calling back so soon. I forgot you're an hour behind us out there in Chicago. That's all right, Mr. Hoover. How can I help you? I asked, hoping I knew what he was going to say. Mr. Parker, normally, we don't look at unsolicited material, but you do good work. The samples you sent us were just great. I showed them around the offices here and got all kinds of oohs and ahas, but to be honest, we wouldn't be interested in publishing a book of photographs. Okay, I thought. I knew it was too good to be true. I wondered if this guy was some kind of sadist that he had to call and reject me personally. Of course, why not? That seemed to be the way my whole week was going. Mr. Hoover continued. However, I had an idea that I kicked around with some of the other editors and they thought it had possibilities. So I brought to the publishing board and they approved it. Ah, Mr. Hoover, I'm sorry, but you've lost me. What ideas? Now I was confused. Well, he said in a friendly voice, we'd like to put your photography together with a book of poetry. Each poem would be a reflection of one of your photos. As you open the book, the left-hand page would have the poem and the right-hand page would contain your photograph. What do you think? Well, I guess it sounds okay to me, I said, as long as the poetry is good. I have to admit, I'm not really into poetry. I would have to refer to you guys on that. Well, he said, that could be a problem. We would need the book resubmitted in its final form. You mean I have get the poetry? Yeah, but it may not be as difficult as it sounds. Are you familiar with Fayette, Illinois? He asked. Sure, it's about 200 miles southwest of Chicago. Why? I had no idea where this conversation was going. Well, said Mr. Hoover, there is a woman who lives there who has sent us a couple manuscripts. Her name is Suzanne Evers, but she goes by Janet. Unfortunately, a book of poems is a hard sell, but her work is very good and I believe she would do a great job on the poetry for your book. You mean collaborate with this woman poet? I don't know. This is starting to sound like it's going to be more work than it's worth. Hell, I said, I don't have time to keep running back and forth to Fayette all time. As soon as I said it, I thought, wait a minute, I have nothing to do on weekends anymore. Maybe I do have the time. Mr. Hoover sounded a little disappointed in my last statement. I could tell by the tone of his voice. Mr. Parker, I'm sorry you feel that way. I kind of built the project up around here and was hoping to publish it. I should have asked you first, I guess. Ah, hold on, Mr. Hoover. I realized I was letting an opportunity slip through my fingers. I've just had my weekends freed up. Do you think this woman would be willing to work on it during the weekends? I would think she would have to work on it then, Mr. Parker. She has a full-time job during the week. Here's what I would like to do. I have not talked to her at all about this yet. I don't know. She may not even be interested, but I kind of doubt that. I'd like to tell her about our proposal, then give her your number. If she's interested, you guys could work it out between the two of you. Just call me back and let me know if it's a go or not. How does that sound to you? Yeah, that would be fine, I said. Good. I'll tell her to call you one way or another. If she says no, would you do me a favor and let me know? Sure, no problem, I said. We left the conversation there, and I started getting ready for an ad shot I was doing for a line of women's shoes. The more I thought about the book, the more I thought the project might be fun. It would certainly fill up my weekends. I found myself really hoping this woman would call and say okay. Of course, I didn't want to admit it to myself, but if I was busy with the book, it would give me another excuse. I could tell myself, I don't have time to get out there and start dating again. I'm too busy with the book. It was well into the afternoon of the next day, and I was about to give up on the lady poet calling me when the phone rang. It was her, and she was very interested in Mr. Hoover's idea. Mr. Parker. I interrupted her. Since we may be working together, I said, why not call me Chris? Okay, Chris, thank you. You can call me Janet. Like I was saying, I hate to make you drive all the way down here, especially since we don't even know for sure if we're going to do anything or not. Have you been to Starved Rock State Park? She asked. Sure, I've been there. Why don't we meet there Saturday morning? That's about halfway between you and me. We can meet by the big fireplace in the clubhouse. That would be great, I said. But how will I know you? I have a pair of red corduroy pants, she said with a little chuckle. You can't miss them. Could you be there about 9 o'clock? About 7:30 Saturday morning, I threw a camera in the seat of my car and started out for Starved Rock with a good sample of my photography in hand. I was feeling pretty good in spite of not being with my kids. A new project, something different. Maybe this is just what I need to get my juices flowing again, I thought. I know it's not nice, but we all do it. I already had a mental picture of Janet in my head from her voice. I visualized her as a short, heavy-set, kind of frumpy elderly lady. After all, she wrote poetry. I was pleasantly surprised when I spotted a pair of red corduroy pants. The woman wearing them was in her mid-30s. Her shoulder-length auburn hair framed a very pretty face and, although very petite, she had a striking figure. We introduced ourselves and found a quiet corner where we could sit and talk. We each had samples of our work, and I had to admit, for someone who knew nothing about poetry, I really liked what I read. Her words were abstract, yet she was able to use them in a way that described her most intimate feelings and thoughts. I became an instant fan. At the same time, she was impressed with my photos. It didn't take long before we both knew we were going to do this book together. Our excitement built as we exchanged one idea after another and talked about the endless possibilities and the intercourse between words and pictures. It wasn't until we both became conscious of our hunger that we realized we had been talking for hours. It was after 1 o'clock already. Lunch is on me, I said. As we studied the menus, the conversation turned from the book to more personal subjects. I learned Janet worked as a counselor at a local college in Fayette and had a master's degree in literature. We both loved rock and roll music and had the same list of favorite bands. Janet was trying desperately to remember the title of her favorite song, but her mind was temporarily a blank. Then, just as our young waitress came to the table with our salads, Janet remembered the song and blurted out, "Easy to be hard." Suddenly, realizing how it sounded when taken out of context, Janet, as well as our waitress, started turning a crimson shade of red. Of course, this was way too good an opportunity to let pass, and I immediately came back with, "I see you're used to dating younger men." Our poor waitress turned away from our table and almost choked trying to stifle a laugh, and Janet had her head buried in her hands. The rest of the lunch was enjoyed with good conversation. I was actually having fun, so when Janet asked if I wanted to hike some of the trails in the park, I readily agreed. I took my camera and got several pictures of Janet against a backdrop of mountains, caverns, and the Illinois River. It had been a full day and was getting dark by the time I walked Janet to her car. We discussed our schedule and the next time we could get together. The following weekend, I had my girls both Saturday and Sunday, so we set up a tentative meeting in 2 weeks. She unlocked her door, then turned to say goodbye. I was about to extend my hand to shake hers when she reached up, put her left hand around my neck, and gently pulled my head down, giving me a tender kiss on the lips. To say I was shocked is probably a major understatement. She smiled. "I really did enjoy myself today," she said in a rather seductive voice. "I'll be looking forward to our next meeting." With that, she opened her car door, and within moments was headed out the parking lot exit. I'm not sure how long I stood there wondering what just happened, but I know the night air was getting cold. The following weekend I spent with Lisa and Linda. There was absolutely nothing more precious to me than the time I spent with them. When I brought them home, they told me they both had plans for the next Saturday and Sunday. Joanne suggested I come over for dinner again one night during the week so I could still spend some time with them. I gratefully accepted. The following week, Janet and I talked several times over the phone and decided I would drive to Fayette Saturday morning to work on the book at her place. On the way down, my mind kept going back to the kiss in the parking lot. I really didn't know how to take it. Was she showing me she was interested, or was it just her way? Hell, I'd only known her a day. How the heck am I supposed to know? Whatever her intentions, I thought, I am not jumping into anything. My score with women so far was women 3, Chris 0. Of course, to be fair, that wasn't really the case. I had some wonderful years with Joanne and 2 great kids. I regretted the loss and the pain, but I sure didn't regret the marriage. Those early years were the best years of my life, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. Laura was just a fling for a few months. I knew going into that relationship it was temporary. Other than great sex, there was no real emotion there. Barbara, however, got to me. I know I never loved her as much as I loved Joanne, but I did love her. I pulled into a nice-looking apartment complex, found the sticker with Janet's name on it, and rung the bell. The apartment was very nice with skylights in the bedroom and the kitchen. There was also a wonderfully large balcony that stretched from the living room to her bedroom. Except for going out for lunch, we spent most of the day there going over some of the poetry she had written using several of my photos for inspiration. Once again, I was amazed with her command of the English language. As I read each poem, I realized the book was not going to take as long to put together as I had thought. In fact, we could probably send in what we had. Much to my disappointment, by 5:30 in the evening we were done. We had the entire book designed, organized, and all packed up and ready to go. What I thought might be a month-long project wound up taking 2 days. "Wow," said Janet, "that didn't take us very long at all, did it?" Janet also sounded as if she was hoping it might take longer as well. "I'll tell you what," she continued, "you have a long drive home. How about staying for dinner? Do you like pork chops?" "Yeah, I like pork chops fine," I said, "but I don't want to put you out. Are you sure you have enough?" "To tell you the truth, I planned on making you dinner, so I bought extra," she said. After dinner we sat and talked over a couple glasses of wine. She told me she was divorced but didn't go into the reasons, and I didn't pry. She talked about her job as a counselor, and I could tell by the way she spoke that she loved her job. I guess she thought she had talked about herself enough, and started asking questions of me. Apparently I wasn't all that forthcoming because she started to call me the strong, silent type. Just about the time when I decide I should get going, she asked one more question. "So, what do you have planned tomorrow when you go home?" she asked. "Am I? You are what? Am I going home tomorrow?" I asked, a little shocked. "You're welcome to spend the night here if you'd like," she said. It hadn't been long ago when I was wondering what I would do in a situation like this. I would never again give my heart to a woman as freely as I had in the past. In that guarded frame of mind, I wondered, would I even be able to make love to another woman? Or at least have passionate sex? "Let's do it in bed," she said. The next morning, I woke up with Janet pressed against me and her arm laying across my chest. It had been a very long time since I had the pleasure of waking up in the morning with a woman in my arms. I didn't realize how much I missed it until that moment. We finally got out of bed. She invited me to take a shower with her. That was always the most fun way I knew to get clean. I didn't hesitate. When we got back, we cuddled in each other's arms and fell into a deep, restful sleep. Sunday, we did the things a lot of couples did. We went out for breakfast, then some antique shopping. Later in the day, we loved the conventional way. At the end of the day, I found myself hating to leave. I had to be careful. I thought to myself, I could wind up falling for this girl, and that's the last thing I want to do again. Several weeks went by. A cold, snowing winter was yielding to a cold, rainy spring. I had spent quite a few weekends with Janet, and I was enjoying the hell out of my new partner. It was the middle of the week. A cold rain was tapping the glass sliding doors leading to the balcony of my condo as I slipped under the covers preparing for a good night's sleep. I would be spending that Sunday with the kids and was still trying to make up my mind if I wanted to make the long drive to and from Fayette to spend just a few hours with Janet. As my mind was drifting off in that twilight stage just before sleep, a ringing noise was forcing me from my intended slumber. What the hell? I thought. It's the phone ringing. It was almost midnight. That could only mean an emergency. No one would call me for any other reason at this hour. I jumped from my bed and ran to phone, picking it quickly and immediately letting whoever was on the only end of the line I was there. "Hello, hello," I answered, my voice obviously depicting my stress. I could hear someone crying faintly but could not make out who it was. "Hello, please, who is this? What's wrong, hello?" I was now panicking. All I could think of was something had happened to either Joanne or the kids. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard Janet's shaky voice. "Chris," she said between sniffles. "Janet, what's wrong?" There was a brief moment of silence while she tried to compose herself. "Chris, I found a lump in my breast." Her voice was fraught with emotion. "I called my doctor, and she wants me to come into the hospital this Saturday morning for a biopsy." I didn't know what to say. "What can you say?" "Janet, don't think the worst. Not yet. Just because you found a lump doesn't mean it's cancerous. You know that. You've got yourself all worked up and you don't know anything for sure yet." Again there was a brief pause. "I know," she said, "but what if it is cancer? What will I do, Chris? What will I do?" "You'll deal with it," I said. "You're a strong, intelligent, successful woman. You'll deal with it." I tried to keep my own voice strong and confident, hoping some of it would rub off on her. "Thanks, Chris. I wish you could be here with me. she said. Honey, I'm sorry. I'd never make it there. I'm too tired to make that drive. I know, she said sadly. Do you think you could do me a favor, though? She didn't wait for my response. My doctor said I should have a loved one take me in for the procedure. Do you think you could take me? The term, loved one, didn't escape me, even as tired as I was. As determined as I was not to fall in love with Janet, I had to admit I had strong feelings for her, but it would be a long time before I allowed myself to fall in love again, with anyone. Of course, I agreed to take Janet in for the biopsy. That morning, I did my best to assure Janet everything would be all right. I left Janet in pre-op and talked to her doctor. It took only about half an hour for the actual procedure, but they had her in recovery for another 2 hours, just to make sure there were no complications from the anesthetic. I stayed with Janet most of the day. We cuddled on the couch and watched old movies on cable. I made lunch and then dinner later in the day. Janet called a girlfriend who came and spent the night with her. The next day I had my girls, but I called Janet a couple times to make sure everything was okay. She seemed a little depressed, but physically she felt fine. Later in the week, she called with the news. She didn't have to tell me the outcome. I could tell by her voice. The lump was benign. Sometimes it takes something like that to shock you into reality. As I hung up the phone, I realized the reality was that my feelings for Janet were a lot stronger than I was willing to admit. Could I really take another chance? Could Janet be one of those great women that Bev was always talking about? A couple weeks later, I was scheduled to spend the entire weekend with Janet. We talked about me coming down Friday night instead of Saturday morning. I was apprehensive because of the long drive that late at night, but thought it would give us an extra night together, so I agreed. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Janet's apartment complex, I could barely see straight. I was so tired. Janet greeted me at the door with a big kiss as usual. It wasn't difficult to see she was primed and ready for action. I was tired and asked her to wait, but she started screaming and hurling abuses. She berated me for being lazy. I was shocked and I had no clue as to what I was watching. I walked into the bedroom, picked up my suitcase and left. For the next week, I hoped she would call me with some kind of explanation, but she never did. After 2 weeks, I gave up thinking I would hear from her at all. From everything I read, my guess was she was suffering from bipolar disorder, but I never knew for sure. I never heard from her again, not even when the first copies of our new book were delivered. Even though I was determined not to, I still let Janet into my heart, at least a little. I don't know if you'd say it was broken again, but it was at least a little dented. Soon it would be time for another Chicago winter. Once again, I sat in my favorite chair and stared out the dark window into the cold abyss. This was the last straw, I told myself. I will devote the rest of my life to my daughters and to my work, the two things in my life that have never let me down. Just before getting ready for bed, I had one more thought. Maybe I'll get a dog. Time passed as it always does. Lisa and Linda both grew into fine, beautiful young ladies. In college, Lisa met a great guy and got married. Linda received her master's degree in music and became the music teacher in the same high school from where she graduated. As digital photography took over the industry more and more, Chris found it harder to compete with the larger studios and all their graphic arts capabilities. One day, Chris had decided he'd had enough and closed the studio for good. Still needing a creative outlet, Chris picked up some paintbrushes for the first time since college and became a respected watercolor artist. Today he paints, plays a lot of golf, and spends the weekends with his 2 grandchildren. Joanne continued to live in celibacy and kept her promise about devoting her life to the girls. She and Chris have always kept in contact and still see each other on holidays and at family functions. March 1st is their wedding anniversary and, although they haven't celebrated it for 25 years, Chris was thinking of sending her a dozen roses on that date just to see what she would say. He smiled and looked towards the sky and said, "That was a stupid thought. Now let's get that dog." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.